Good morning. I would like to call the Monday, March 12th, 2018 Board of Zoning Adjustments meeting to order. We'll begin with roll call. Candace Forrest is absent. Todd James.
Present.
Ramiro Diaz.
Present.
Alfonso Gonzalez.
Present.
Mary Malone.
Here.
Nicholas Richard.
Present.
Michael Broussard is absent. At this time, would the board make a motion to adopt the minutes from the February 19th meeting?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the minutes from last month's meeting. All those in favor by show of hands? We have 5 votes. Thank you.
Will the chairwoman please read the hearing rules for variances?
I'll take that one. I think she's actually going to be joining us a little bit later. All right. So rules and procedures for the public hearing for variance requests for the Board of Zoning Adjustments. The following procedures shall be observed during the meeting. Each speaker shall give his or her name and address prior to speaking on the proposal. The applicant or representative will speak first. The presenter shall be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes for each The presentation shall be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes for each applicant or representative speaker. But in no event shall the cumulative presentation time by applicants or by their representatives exceed 10 minutes. Proponents or persons in favor of the proposal will speak next and be allowed 2 minutes per speaker. Opponents or persons in opposition to the proposal will speak next and be allowed 2 minutes per speaker. The applicant or representative will be allowed a rebuttal, but the rebuttal will be limited to a cumulative maximum of 3 minutes. Additional information. For any exceptional case, time limitations will be extended by the presiding officer with the approval of the board. As the board deems necessary, the case may be acted upon at the meeting or deferred for additional information or review. If the case is deferred, it will be acted on at the subsequent meeting as provided by law. All proper parliamentary procedures shall be followed, including recognition of speakers, relevance of argument, and absolute prohibition of applause and demonstration. Standards for review. The Board of Zoning Adjustments shall not authorize a variance for the requirements of the comprehensive zoning ordinance unless it finds it based upon the evidence presented that in each case has satisfied the 9 criteria as listed within the CZO, Article 4, Section 4.6F, Ordinance Number 4264 MCS. Okay.
Thank you. 3 items have been withdrawn from the agenda. Item number 1, BZA docket 01818, a request for a property located at 4215 through 19 South Claiborne Avenue. Item number 4, BZA docket 022-18, a variance request for a property located at 2019 Jenna Street. And item number 5, BZA docket 02518, a variance request for a property located at 5300 Constant Street. We will begin with the unfinished business.
The first item is BZA docket 1918 for a property located at 2400 Upper Line Street. This request is for a variance from the provisions of Article 11, Section 11, 3A1, Table 11-2A of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance. This request is in conjunction with subdivision docket 14317, which was approved by the City Planning Commission on December 12, 2017, subject to a proviso that the applicant obtain a variance from the BZA for insufficient minimum lot depth. The applicant is proposing to re-subdivide existing lot 2 into lots 2A and 2B in HURD2 Historic Urban 2-Family Residential District. The applicant plans to redevelop proposed lots 2A and 2B with a 2-family party wall double with each unit sitting on its own lot. The subject of BZA 1918 is lot 2B. The applicant proposes to re-subdivide the existing 6,300 square foot rectangular lot into 2 3,150 square foot rectangular lots, each with a lot depth of 63 feet. The CZO requires a minimum lot depth of 90 feet in the HURD2 district. The applicant is proposing a lot depth of 63 feet and requests a waiver of 27 feet. Based on this report, the staff believes that the requested variance from the provisions of Article 11, Section 11(3)(a)(1), Table 11-2A of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit an insufficient minimum lot depth fails to meet the standards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the standards for variance. Article 4, Section 4.6.f of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, and that there are no special circumstances which are peculiar to the land or structure. Literal interpretation of the provisions of the ordinance will not deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district. The special circumstances were caused by applicant. The variance will confer on the applicant's special privileges. The variance will alter the essential character of the locality. The current property regulations will not result in a demonstrable hardship, and the requested change is exclusively for the convenience of the owner. Therefore, the staff recommends denial of the requested variance.
Okay, prior to the speaker coming up, and it's just a clarification from legal, I know when we had this one last month, the requests were different, and since they're now exactly the same, they're asking for the same waiver amount. Should we consider consolidating the two? It would be BZA 019 and 020.
Right, before one of them had a front yard waiver that has been removed, so now they're identical, same property, subject.
I apologize, yes, consolidation would be fine.
Okay. And so if anybody wants to present that motion, we could go ahead and consolidate BZA 019-18 and 020-18, since we're going to discuss the exact same items and criteria.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to combine the two dockets.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to consolidate BZA item 019-18 and 020-18. All those in favor of the motion? All right, we have all five in favor. All right, so staff, if you don't mind, just summarizing 020-18, and then that way you guys are just presenting this once.
Yeah, 2018 is basically the lot on the other side of 2019 is lot 2B, 2018 is lot 2A. And so they're the same dimensions, the same variance request, which is it's a requirement of 90 feet lot depth. They're proposing 63 feet, a waiver of 27 feet.
All right, thank you. So the applicant, you have 3 minutes.
Ed Pointer, 1801 Octavia Street. Thanks. I was going to give you we were here 3 weeks ago, I was going to give a summary, but Travis did a good summary. It seems like you're all up to speed. What most concerned the board at the last meeting was our request for a front build 2 line setback off of LaSalle Street from the required 20 feet down to about 15 feet. We have withdrawn that request for a variance, and we're going to redesign the unit on that lot 2B to have the full 20-foot setback from LaSalle Street. So the only variances requested here for both of these lots is the lot depth variance, and that's to allow us to do the re-subdivision into 50 by 63 lots so that we can do a party wall double that addresses all 3 streets, frames the 2 corners properly, and hopefully is a better design than the long shotgun or townhouse style double we would have to do. In your packets, you have our letter to the board with our positions on the 9 criteria, and you have our presentation and discussion and questions from 3 weeks ago already in the record, so I don't think we need to go into that. I am available if you have any more questions on this, or if you'd like me to go into a topic we didn't do last time.
Okay, I know you still have some time on the clock. I mean, Ms. Moore, I also have cards from you if you want to. Okay. All right, if you want, I'll just go ahead and see if there's anybody else here to provide any comment, then we'll come back to questions. Anyone else here to speak in favor of the request for BZA docket number 019 or 020-18? Okay, hearing none. Anyone here to speak in opposition to the 2 requests? Okay, any questions? Well, since we don't have any rebuttal at this point, any questions from the board?
The motion is in order?
Yeah, unless anybody else has any questions or comments, if you're ready to present a motion.
Yeah, and seeing as that it's a really unique property and that you've got the two corners and you're trying to address them and that it's in line with what the City Planning Commission was proposing as well. I'd like to make a motion to accept the letter from the applicant stating that the 9 criteria have been met and move for approval.
Second. If we could the staff give you one proviso?
Sure.
Typically, when you approve a lot that has this party wall double scenario, that we add a proviso that requires that the stamp actually stamp those lots as being approved for party wall doubles. This will enable the applicant to do what they want, but prevent somebody 50 years down the road from then trying to knock these structures down and make these individual lots that will then have to achieve 20-foot rear yard and front yard setbacks.
Okay.
I don't think the applicant would object to that.
So then,
I see a thumbs up from them, so listen.
so I'll amend it to include the proviso and any, were there other noted provisos, the 3 standard provisos?
Actually, no, this is really in conjunction with the subdivision, and they pulled the drawing, so it would just be that one, we put the standard subdivision stamp on the subdivision requiring that these lots be for party wall development.
Okay, so that's a motion, and that motion's been amended. A second on that amended motion. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? So, excuse me, the motion that's presented right now for BZA docket number 019-18 and 020-18 for articles. The motion that's presented is a waiver to approve the request for waiver for Article 11, Section 11.3A1, Table 11.2A, where the required lot depth is 90 feet, with provided of 63 with a waiver of 27 feet for both items. Understanding that there are 9 criteria amendment, accepting the applicant's letter for 9 criteria, but noting the one proviso as mentioned by staff for compliance with the party wall separation at the rear yard. All those in favor of that motion as presented? We have 5 in favor, so that motion passes.
And just notice my one abstention, just that I wasn't here for the discussion. Thank you.
All right. Motion passes. And now I can hand this back.
Item number 4, BZA 02218 was withdrawn by the applicant. We will now begin with the new business. Item number 5 was also withdrawn by the applicant.
Next item is docket number 026-18. This is a request for variance from the provisions of Article 21, Section 21.6.EE.3 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit construction of a swimming pool with insufficient setback from the rear property line. The requested waiver is from Article 21.6.DE.3, swimming pools. The required setback is 4 feet. The proposed setback is 1 foot for a waiver of 3 feet. The petition site is Lot 9, Square 417, Belligny Survey in the 6th Municipal District of the city, with the municipal address at 10 Palm Terrace. It's a regularly shaped lot having a width of 48 feet, a depth of 65 feet, and an area of about 3,120 feet. It's in the HU RM1 Historic Urban Multifamily Residential District and subject to the Development Standards Article 11 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance. The site's currently developed with a 1-story single-family residence, which is also a designated local historic landmark. Upon review of the facts and circumstances of the application, we find that the request for a waiver of 3 feet from Article 21, Section 21.6.EE.3 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance meets all of the 9 criteria listed in the CZO section 4.61F as they pertain to this request. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the request to construct the swimming pool 1 foot from the rear property line, subject to the following provisos. Prior to issuance of building permit by the Department of Safety and Permits, the applicant shall submit a revised site plan, floor plan of the subject site to BZA staff for review and approval. Plan shall be planned for which building permit is to be issued. Plan shall demonstrate compliance with the 30% minimum permeable open space requirement for the property and provisions of Article 21, Section 21.6 EE. Number 2, applicant shall restore sidewalks and curbs on all street frontages located within the public rights of way adjacent to the site, subject to the review and approval of the Public Works Department.
Is the applicant present?
My name is Doug Conkey, 8518 Oak Street.
Did you have anything that you wish to add?
No, I don't.
Is there anyone else here in support of docket 026-18? Anyone here in opposition to docket 026-18? Any questions from the board?
Just a quick question to staff. Just want a little bit further clarity on if there's anything from the building code that will cause any issue with this approval. Just concerned about proximity to the property line.
They're gonna have to meet all the standards of the building code, and if they don't, they'll have to go before BZA and mitigate it with an appropriate solution.
Gotcha. No further questions.
Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, motion in order in reference to the docket number 026-18. I move that we accept the city's recommendation in approving this waiver since the non-precedent have been met, and including the 2 proposals.
Second.
With regard to docket 026-18, it's been moved by Commissioner Malone, second by Commissioner James, to accept the staff's recommendation and grant the requested waiver, finding that the 9 criteria have been met, subject to 2 provisos. All in favor, raise your hand. 6. No opposition, the motion carries. Next item.
Thank you very much.
The next item is BZA docket 02718 for a property located at 3031 through 3033 Cleveland Avenue. This request is for variances from the provisions of Article 11, Section 11.3A1, Table 11-2A, and Article 22, Section 2211B of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit the construction of a 2-family residence with insufficient minimum rear yard setback and excessive curb cut. The staff determined that the application could not be considered because the plans submitted by the applicant are not representative of the property's current conditions, including the omission of the balcony on the site plan. The staff met with the applicant and discussed the modifications needed. The applicant is currently working with the architects to amend the plans. The staff is requesting deferral to allow the applicant time to revise and resubmit their plans. In addition, the applicant has expressed interest in withdrawing their application and modifying the requested rear yard setback and curb cut variance, thereby coming into compliance with the minimum rear yard setback of 7 feet 2 inches and altering the curb cut to the allowable width of 12 feet. Staff is awaiting updated information from the applicant to determine if the applicant would be able to fully withdraw the application or if a waiver for the rear yard setback and the maximum curb cut width requirement would still be necessary. Therefore, the staff recommends a 60-day deferral of the requested variances.
Thank you. Is the applicant present for docket 027-18? Is there anyone here in support of docket 027-18? Anyone here in opposition to docket 027-18? Any questions from the board?
Is the motion in order?
Yes, proceed.
Madam Chair, regards to docket number 027-18, at the recommendation of staff, will move for 30-day deferral to, 60-day deferral, talking too quick, to allow staff and the applicant time to confer if this withdrawal is necessary.
Second.
With regard to docket 027-18, it's been moved by Commissioner James, second by Commissioner Gonzalez, to defer the matter 60 days at the request of staff. All in favor, raise your hand. 6, no opposition. Motion carries. Next item.
The next item is BZA docket 028-18 for a property located at 122 through 24 South Salcedo Street. This request is for variances from the provisions of Article 11, Section 11-3A1, Table 11-2A, and Article 22, Section 2211B of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit the construction of a two-family residence with insufficient minimum rear yard setback and excessive curb cut. The staff determined that the application cannot be considered because the plans submitted by the applicant need modification, including the addition of the mechanical equipment and the proposed balcony on the site plan. The staff met with the applicant and discussed the modifications needed. The applicant is currently working with the architects to amend their plans. The staff is therefore requesting deferral to allow the applicant time to revise and resubmit their plans. In addition, the applicant has expressed their interest in the potential to withdraw the application and come into compliance. Therefore, in order to give the applicant time to amend their plans and see if they can come into compliance, staff is recommending a 60-day deferral of the requested variances.
Thank you. Is the applicant present for docket 028-18? Anyone here in support of docket 028-18? Anyone here in opposition?
Yes.
If you come forward to the mic, please.
Yes, good morning. My name is Norris.
If you come over to this mic all the way to the
okay.
end. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning to you. My name is Norris Butler, and I am the owner of 301618 Cleveland Avenue. I noticed that it has no required off-street parking, and if you're familiar with the neighborhood of ownership of the property with the school, Marsh Jump, with the veteran homes, with the handicap building around the corner on, I guess, Galloso, and Warren Easton, and the bicycle shop in the neighborhood, it is required to have off-street parking. Previously, you all granted a waiver on a house on I guess, Galloso. You waiver one parking, and you made a double. Now there's 3 cars addition to the one that have off-street parking. I think the city needs to consider off-street parking on both with the 30 and 31 Cleveland and 33 Cleveland. I think some of you need to ride through the neighborhood and see how difficult for people to pick up their kids at 3:30. I think that you will offer and ask for off-street parking. You got to look at the neighborhood, and the parents will pick up their kids at 3:30. You can't find a parking spot within 5 blocks. In addition, on Lopez, there's a hotel, which doesn't make any sense in a residential neighborhood next to I guess a elementary school and a high school, and you gotta go and see how many cars are parked on the sidewalk. And I don't think it's fair to homeowners, all right, because we do pay taxes, and I was a former city employee for 40 years, and if you go and look, you will request some off-street parking, because the neighborhood are really upset about this, and the only thing that I regret, my partner or my friend is not living anymore. That was Paul Bay. All right?
All right, thank you.
All right, so that's the problem that we have in the neighborhood. I guess the other homeowner is at work.
All right, Mr. Butler, that was the end, that bell was the end of your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I don't know what set of plans you may have, but there is off-street parking that is provided. There's some on the ground level of the project. There is off-street parking included, so that is addressed and covered.
Well, okay. I live in the neighborhood, so as the project develops, I would understand and I would see. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else here in opposition to docket 028-18? Any questions from the board?
There's a motion in order.
Yes, proceed.
Madam Chair, in regards to docket number 028-18, a motion is to follow staff's recommendation to allow for a 60-day deferral for staff to coordinate with the applicant and their representatives to see if whatever details need to be further developed.
Second.
With regard to docket 028-18, it's been moved by Commissioner James, second by Commissioner Gonzalez to defer the matter 60 days at the request of staff. All in favor, raise your hand. 6, no opposition, the motion carries. Next item.
The next item is BZA docket 2918 for a property located at 1301 Milton Street. The request is for variances from the provisions of Article 13, Section 13.3A1, Table 13-2 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance. The subject lots 1 and 2 in Square 2677, bounded by Milton, Buchanan, Foy, and Alfred Streets, are located in the St. Bernard neighborhood. Lots 1 and 2 lie within a single parcel with the municipal address 1301 Milton. Lots 1 and 2 each measure 100 feet deep and 20 feet wide. The total area of the combined lots is 4,000 square feet. The applicant is proposing to construct a 1,725 square foot single family residence on lots 1 and 2, which are currently undeveloped. The subject property was previously developed with a 2-family residence that was demolished in 2011. A single family residence is permitted by right in the SRD district. However, Article 13, Table 13-2 requires a front yard setback of 20 feet, and the applicant is proposing a setback of 10 feet, 3.5 inches, therefore a waiver of 9 feet, 8.5 inches is being requested. The staff found that this request meets all 9 of the criteria required to grant a variance. Therefore, staff recommends approval of requested variance subject to 4 provisos.
Thank you. Is the applicant present for docket 029-18? If you can come up to the mic, please. If you can give your name and address for the record.
David Fuselier, 1850 Harbor Drive, Slidell, Louisiana.
Did you have anything that you wish to add?
No.
That's fine. Is there anyone else here in support of docket 029-18? Anyone here in opposition to docket 029-18? Any questions from the board? And what's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, the motion is in order.
Yes, proceed.
In regards to docket number, I just had it in front of me. Docket 029-18, I move for approval following the staff's recommendation and subject to the 4 noted provisos.
Second.
With regard to docket 029-18, it's been moved by Commissioner Gonzalez, second by Commissioner Richard, to grant the requested waiver, finding that the 9 criteria have been met, subject to 4 provisos. All in favor, raise your hand. All 6, no opposition, the motion carries. Next item.
The next item is BZA docket 30-18 for a property located at 1007 St. Rock Avenue within the HMR 3 Historic Maryland Treme Bywater Residential District. This is a request for a variance from the provisions of Article 9, Section 9.3.a, Table 9.2 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit the construction of a single-family dwelling with insufficient interior side yard and rear yard setbacks. Article 9, Section 9.3.a, Table 9.2 requires a 3-foot minimum interior side yard setback. The applicant is providing a 0-foot setback, 0-foot interior side yard setback on the St. Claude Avenue side and a 2-foot 5-inch setback on the North Rampart Street side, and seeking a waiver of 3 feet on the St. Claude Avenue side and 7 inches on the North Rampart side. Article 9, Section 9.3.8, Table 9.2 requires a 20-foot minimum rear yard setback. The applicant is providing a 16-foot rear yard setback, necessitating a 4-foot waiver. The staff believes the request does satisfy the 9 criteria as they pertain to the requested variances. Therefore, the staff recommends approval of the requested variance subject to 2 provisos.
Thank you. Is the applicant present for docket 030-18? Is there anyone here in support of docket 030-18? Anyone here in opposition? And just for clarity, the applicant was aware of the recommendation with
Yes.
the approval and the provisos?
Yes.
Any questions from the board? What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, a motion is in order.
Yes, proceed.
In reference to BZA docket number 030-18, I move that we accept the city's recommendation in approving this waiver along with the provisos.
Second.
With regard to docket 030-18, it's been moved by Commissioner Malone, second by Commissioner James, to grant the requested waivers, finding that the 9 criteria have been met, subject to 2 provisos. All in favor, raise your hand. All 6, no opposition, the motion carries. Next item.
The next item is BZA docket 031-18 for property located at 2932 through 2940 Cambron Street. This request is for the variances from the provisions of Article 22, Section 22.4.8, Table 22-1, off-street vehicle requirements of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance to permit an addition to an existing place of worship resulting in an insufficient off-street parking. Article 22, Section 22.4.8, Table 22-1 requires one off-street parking space per 4 seats or one off-street parking space per 30 square feet, whichever is greater, for a place of worship in a single family and 2 family districts. The applicant met with the Department of Safety and Permits, and in accordance with Article 22, Section 22.2.e, they determined that the parking requirements would only apply to the proposed addition. The applicant is providing 0 spaces on site and is seeking a waiver of 32 spaces. Based on this report, the staff believes the requested variance of Article 22, Section 22.4.8, Table 22-1, off-street vehicle parking requirements, fails to meet the standards 2, 3, 6, and 7 of the standards for variances of Article 4, Section 4.6.f of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, in that literal interpretation of the ordinance will not deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the district. Special conditions and circumstances result from the actions of the applicant and other interested parties. The property regulations will not result in a demonstrable hardship, and the purpose of the variance is based exclusively on the convenience and or profit of the applicant. Therefore, staff recommends denial of the requested variance.
Is the applicant present for docket 31-18?
Good morning. I'm Robert Carpenter. I'm an elder and president of Carrollton Avenue Church of Christ, and also owner of the property. Then Carrollton Avenue is also the owner of the property at Holly Grove and operates that church. My personal address is 6508 Gillen Street, Metairie, Louisiana. Charles Masalis, one of my fellow elders, his wife Angela, and their son Willie are ministers at Holly Grove, and they will make a brief statement relative to our work in the community.
Good morning, Board. I'm the minister of Holly Grove Church of Christ.
And you can give your name and address for the record as you start your comments. Thank you.
Okay, I live at 8416 Fig Street.
And what's your name?
Charles myself.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm the minister there, and our church started in that community, and we work with the youth, the young children, and the young teenagers. We moved there because we wanted to make a difference in these young people's lives. And our church is about 70% of young children and under the age of 20. And when it rains, then our kids, our attendance get real low because our kids walk to the congregation. And I feel that we are making a difference in these young people's lives. I hear my time.
Good morning, Board. My name is Angela Marsalis. I live at 8416 5th Street. I just wanted to say thank God for the opportunity to be here. I work as a children outreach minister in the Holly Grove community, along with my other regular duties of going to school and work. We've been working with young children and teens in the Holly Grove area for the past 10 years. Our mission actually started right after Katrina on my mom's porch. We served the children by giving them snacks and having Bible Devo at 8739 Apple Street, which all evolved to where we are now. Our goal is to continue to reach out to young people where we are. We host after-school tutoring where we are. We also host a one-week summer camp, and it's all free, and they get lunch and breakfast there as well. And we also have other activities year-round. And the kids, I just really enjoyed, and we just hoping you all bless us with the opportunity just to connect the two buildings. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Willie Marcellus, address 8434 Oleander Street. I'm one of the youth mentors at the Holly Grove Church of Christ. I deal with the young ones. Throughout my years of mentoring and trying to be a positive role model for the kids in the community, I witnessed a lot of the struggles that these kids face throughout their lives, whether it's crime, murder, whatever the case may be along those lines. And one of the toughest parts for me is having to build a bond and relationship with these kids and wake up the next morning to a text message or a phone call saying that one of these kids have been incarcerated or murdered or whatever the case may be. But when these kids come to Holly Grove, we do give them the kind of love and care that they've never really witnessed in their lives before. And we just thankful for the opportunity to be able to be a positive role model for these kids in the community. I'm willing to sacrifice whatever, whether that be time, school, financials, whatever the case may be, just so that these kids can at least taste the same opportunities as anyone else.
We thank the board for indulging us in giving you some background into our operations. There were 4 statements for the standards that the staff indicated that we did not meet. I'll address those 4. We believe that we do meet those standards. Standard number 2, literal interpretation of the provision will deprive our place of worship rights that others within the district currently enjoy. Table 3 and 4 of your package indicates that all 12 places of worship within our district are not in compliance with off-street parking requirements, some with deficiencies of hundreds of spaces. 4 provide no off-street parking at all. More than half the places of worship in this district have building areas larger than ours. Imposing this right to modify, imposing this requirement upon us would deprive us of our right to modify our building area to create a functioning space to minister to the community and its children, rights that other places of worship undoubtedly have exercised through the years. Standard number 2, we believe that the special conditions and circumstances are not the result of our actions, but are the result of the very nature of places of worship within our district. The size of existing churches or our proposed addition does not change the nature of these Orleans neighborhood churches that serve the immediate community. Members primarily walk to church and as such do not require traditional on-site parking. As indicated on table 3 and stated before, all places of worship within our district utilize street parking almost exclusively as they grew organically to serve their community. Standard number 6, we believe they are demonstrated hardships created by adhering to this regulation. The suggested alternatives designed are not practical or cost effective, would not answer the needs of the church, and would, if implemented, run afoul of another regulatory body of the city or other BZA standards. The suggestion of demolishing buildings or portions of buildings or possibly raising them and implementing structured parking at grade level would require the approval of the HDLC to demolish historic buildings. The addition of grade level parking, in essence, a parking garage, would conflict with the nature of a place of worship serving its neighborhood and is not in character with our nearby buildings. Finally, such a design would still not provide parking spaces to satisfy those required. And finally, standard number 7. The variance is not requested exclusively for the convenience of profit. The 900 square foot addition is for the benefit of the community, which is served by this place of worship, specifically children and teenagers. As we are not a commercial venture, there is no profit to be had. And in fact, congregational contributions do not currently or will ever cover monthly expenses. Can I continue with seating from the others? Thank you. I'm almost finished.
And actually, give us 1 second on that. I think you were stopping them on time, but just as a quick note, I don't mind extending it because some of the other proponents did not.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that clear that, yeah, some of them hadn't fulfilled their time, so you still have, we'll give you an additional couple of minutes.
Thank you, I'm almost finished. As I was saying, congregational contributions do not currently or will ever cover monthly expenses. We are providing this ministry as a vital investment in the Holly Grove community and are fortunate to receive significant outside donations to cover the shortfalls. As stated regarding item 6, the suggested alternative design is not feasible. Opportunities to purchase land nearby are limited and expensive. The initial land cost and development expenses would be prohibitive. Such a scenario, if played out, would result in scarce financial resources being diverted from serving the community to providing parking that is not needed or would be used. As stated in staff's report, for Standard A, parking can be accommodated with the on-street parking available. Any development of parking on property purchased would require demolition of historic buildings and HDLC approval and a waiver from this body, as there would still be a deficiency in parking spaces. Finally, an underutilized empty parking lot or facility would not be conducive to our residential neighborhood, as it would create problems and become an eyesore. Kirk Garrison will conclude our presentation.
As been noted, we're a neighborhood church. People walk to Sunday services. Most of them are kids or teenagers. It's reflected in both the lack of opposition from the neighborhood. It's also reflected from the neighbors and the staff to point out there's plenty of on-street parking, especially on Sunday mornings when everybody's closed. We've got commercial on 2 sides of us across the street. As with any inner-city ministry, resources are always inadequate to meet the needs, and investing large sums to build off-street parking that won't be used really does divert funds that could be better used to minister to the community. As a traditional neighborhood church in Holly Grove, we want to continue to be a vital part of the fabric and vibrant part of the health of that neighborhood. And a waiver of the off-street parking, I believe, will allow that to continue. We appreciate y'all.
If you could give your address for the record, please.
My name is Kirk Garrison. I live at 918 Harmony Street.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here in support of docket 031-18?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Ellis at 8228 Big Street. I strongly support this because they have been a blessing in this neighborhood for the young people, well as old people, well as myself. I live 1 block from the church. I can walk to church. I feel good about that. So I would appreciate y'all if y'all can do whatever you can to help us. Thank you. God bless.
Anyone, excuse me, anyone else here in support of docket 031-18? Anyone here in opposition?
Thomas Miller, 7721 Plum Street. I'm not here in opposition, I'm here for informational purposes. So I'm not taking a position for or against this particular variance request. But I wanted to point out, it's been brought to my attention in a different situation, a serious problem with the grandfathering in of parking spaces for church properties, because there are very intensive requirements for off-street parking. And then, however, when the property changes ownership, perhaps it's no longer a church, and another use comes in, then you've got all of these grandfathered in parking spaces for a different use that I would think, in all likelihood, would not have been grandfathered in for the new use. To give you an example, more than one of these properties has become a restaurant. So restaurants operate at different hours than churches. And particularly, as was mentioned here, they're operating on Sunday morning when there's nothing else is open. So, so then, if this, maybe not this church, but another church, as also was pointed out, in support of their request, they looked at 12 churches in their area, and they found out that none of them fulfilled the off-street parking requirements. Some of them, and I was quoted, as mentioned, some of them had hundreds of spaces that had been, requirement that were not being used. So what I would suggest is that you direct your staff to look at the grandfathering in of church spaces that have been, the grandfathering of church off-street spaces, and perhaps a different rule should apply to churches than other uses.
Okay, that was the end of your time, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I address that just quickly? That the standard for grandfathering is something that comes through the state law, as you well know. And I would also suggest that there's a potential equal protection problem with differentiating between the standards that we apply to grandfathering for churches. We have looked at this before, and that's why in many cases we recommend denial for granting parking waivers, because land use regulations go to the land, not to the individual. And while the individuals may be wonderful and deserving, land use develops over the years, and those variances do stay with the property. But I don't think that we're going to have a whole lot of luck. You're an attorney, you can pursue it and look yourself at changing the grandfathering laws only for churches or religious institutions.
It's I would just suggest that you look at this again. I'm just replying to her.
Well, no, it's not a back and forth, so, but thank you. Anyone else here in opposition to docket 031-18? Any questions from the board?
Just a quick question to the church. One thing I may have skipped over in the information. What is the primary ages that you guys are serving with the kids program?
You have to come up to the mic so we can put it on the
teens and
record.
under.
It is teens. Okay, thank you.
It started with children basically on the front porch and kind of grew from there. Some of the parents have come along, a lot of them haven't.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, for motions in order.
Are there any other questions from the board? I had one question, just for clarity. I know that for the addition, there were no parking spaces. Are there any parking spaces on the property exist currently?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
There is some additional off-street parking that's not shown on the staff's report.
Mm-hmm.
All the parking on the Earhart is street parking, and that's just a block from the church.
Okay.
And there's 3 blocks of street parking.
That's on street. I was just asking if there was any off-street that was already currently provided. Okay.
First, kind of break with protocol, and thank Joseph, thank you for the way that you wrote this report. It just helped to provide a lot of clarity. And to you guys for your comments, especially addressing the 9 criteria. Every once in a while we don't necessarily get that level of detail, so it's really appreciated. So this makes this a lot easier. Madam Chair, in regards to docket number 031-18, my motion is to approve the requested waiver for Article 22, Section 22.4a, Table 22.1, for the waiver of the required parking spaces of 32, providing 0 and a waiver of 32. You were about to say something?
Yeah, if I may, if the board does seek to approve, we have included 6.
Correct, and that's
Okay.
that's why I'm thanking you for your report, because it was in there. So this is cool. Yep. So, and I want to accept the applicant's testimony to address the 4 remaining criteria that were not fulfilled, and go ahead and approve with the 6 noted provisos that was provided within our report on page 13.
Second.
With regard to docket 031-18, it's been moved by Commissioner James, second by Commissioner Gonzalez, to grant the requested waiver, finding that the 9 criteria have been met, accepting the applicant's verbal testimony as well as their written discussion of the 9 criteria with 6 noted provisos. All in favor, raise your hand. All 6, no opposition, the motion carries. Next item.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the Director of Safety and Permits Decision Appeals. Will the Chairwoman please read the hearing rules for decision appeals?
Rules and procedures for public hearings, appeals of decisions of the Director of the Department of Safety and Permits. The following procedures shall be observed during the appeal hearing. Each speaker shall give his or her name and address prior to speaking on the proposal. The representative of the Department of Safety and Permits shall present to the board the decision which is under appeal, the relevant code sections relating to the appeal, and any information explaining the department's decision. The applicant or representative will speak next. The presentation shall be limited to a maximum of 5 minutes for each applicant or representative speaker, but in no event shall the cumulative presentation total by applicants or their representatives exceed 15 minutes. Proponents or persons in favor of the proposal will speak next and be allowed 3 minutes per speaker. Opponents or persons in opposition of the proposal will speak next and be allowed 3 minutes per speaker. The applicant or representative will be allowed a rebuttal. The rebuttal shall be limited to a cumulative maximum of 5 minutes. For an exceptional case, the time limitations may be extended by the presiding officer with the approval of the board. As the board deems necessary, the case may be acted upon at this meeting or deferred for additional information or review. If the case is deferred, it will be acted on at a subsequent meeting as provided by law. All proper parliamentary procedures shall be followed, including recognition of speakers, relevance of argument, and absolute prohibition of applause or demonstration. Standard of review. The Board of Zoning Adjustments has the power to hear and decide appeals where it is alleged there is an error in any order, requirement, decision, or determination made by an administrative officer in the enforcement of the comprehensive zoning ordinance. The board also has the power to hear and determine appeals from applicants who have been refused a building permit because of a violation or conflict with the zoning ordinance or the official map of the city. The applicant's appeal to the Board of Zoning Adjustments is governed by Section 5-408 of the City of New Orleans Home Rule Charter.
Thank you. We will now begin with the new business. Our next item is item number 12, BZA docket 03218 for a property located at 230 Charter Street. This is an appeal of a decision of the Director of Safety and Permits as per Article 4, Section 4.8 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance regarding the determination of the proposed use of the property.
Thank you. Good morning. Excuse me, Jared Munster, Director of Safety and Permits. The appeal before you today relative to 230 Charter Street is alleging an error in the determination of safety and permits that the proposed use of the space constitutes an indoor amusement facility. The appellants argue that this should be considered an office. The proposed use is described by the applicants as essentially a traditional escape room, but to be used for corporate team building exercises. Safety and Permits has determined that these escape room venues, such as at the mortuary on Canal Street or a couple in the CBD, to be indoor amusement facilities. And the purpose for this is that an escape room is not a defined use of the CZO. So therefore we have to default to the rules of generic definition, where we then have to sort of interpret a proposed use to the closest parallel in the zoning ordinance. So based on that, we use indoor amusement facilities, which are spectator and participatory uses conducted within an enclosed building. And the examples given in the definition are movie theaters, bowling alleys, pool halls, arcades, and indoor sporting exhibitions. However, the definition goes on to say that indoor amusement facilities may include ancillary uses such as snack bars or restaurants for use of patrons. But you know, if it's a favorite restaurant, then the secondary use bar is separately regulated. So again, what we default to is that first sentence, that it's spectator and participatory uses conducted within an enclosed building. And that is what is proposed here. So with that, I remain available for any questions.
Thank you. Is the applicant present?
Good morning. My name is Zella May. My address is 2525 Burgundy Street, New Orleans. The reason we're here, I think, is the lack of information that was given to the Board of Zoning, and the fact that not all escape rooms are, you're comparing apples with oranges, but most importantly, this is operating as an office. They're not going to be opened standard hours. They're not taking people off the street. It's not an indoor amusement. And the best person to explain that is the owner that happens to be with me. And I'd like to yield some time to him, Nelson Rodney, please.
Good morning. My name is Nelson Rodney. The applicant address is 230 Charter Street. My background is in both clinical psychology and group dynamics, and this facility differs from what was described as traditional escape room in 6 very important ways. The first way is that I've designed this room, these escape rooms, what we're calling group dynamic training rooms, from the ground up to perform that function. It is not the regular escape room that you might think of or have experience with. Our rooms are much larger. The other escape rooms in New Orleans area hold a maximum of 6 to 12 people, and our rooms are designed to hold groups that are larger than that, because corporate groups and other interested activity groups would be larger than 6 to 12. The themes are corporate desirable in our rooms and are not standard escape room kinds of themes, which would be sometimes bloody, sometimes gore related, sometimes insane asylum related, sometimes prison room related. Our themes have none of those elements in them, because what we're doing is doing corporate team training. We also have no zombies in our rooms, as some other rooms do that. We also place a trained facilitator in each room with the participants, because we're observing group dynamic behavior and writing reports based on, and giving verbal reports based on what we observe in the room, so that there's feedback given to the groups afterwards. And we do, as a 5th difference, perform post-activity assessments for the groups, which none of the other standard traditional escape rooms would do. And finally, we have devoted in our space, in our plans for the space, 400 square feet, which is a large room, for a meeting space, both before the groups get together and afterwards. So if you think of it as if when there's a group of scientists, for example, that would get together, and they have a lot of experience and are very accomplished in doing things individually, now they come to this task that they have to perform, and perform well as a group. How do they learn to act as a group when their experience and expertise is all acting individually? And that is what we plan on doing in this room, which is a very unique thing. We're using the escape room only as one of our instruments in training group dynamics and in teaching people how to be more efficient and effective. And we have done this in other places with groups from universities, University of Miami, Florida International University, for example, with the Food and Drug Administration, groups from there, with the World Bank, for example, groups from there. We have very well-known corporate clients that we work with in teaching how to work together. For example, in New Orleans, I could see us working with a hospital group that would work in an emergency room, and it's very important that they learn how to communicate best and act as a team rather than just as individuals, even if they're very skilled surgeons, nurses, assistants in that space. So because we believe that we're providing professional expertise in this setting, and because all of our customers would be by appointment only, we think it's different from a traditional escape room. We understand how the finding was made at the beginning because we didn't explain it, I think, fully, but that's why I'm here today, to help explain it fully, how our concept is different and why we believe we fit under office definition rather than indoor amusement. Have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
We'll address the questions at a later point. We have to finish through our process.
Sure.
Anyone else here in support of the applicant for decision appeal docket number 032-18? Anyone here in opposition? If you can come up, please.
Good morning, Meg Lusto, Executive Director of VC for 816 North Rampart Street. And I have spoken with the applicant. I have received some of the information about what they're proposing. I didn't get to hear all of the comments offered by the applicant, but I don't think that they're necessarily germane to what's really at stake here. We hear time and time again that we're in danger of the French Quarter becoming Disney World. And one of my group's main goals is to make sure that that doesn't happen, that it stays a neighborhood. And when we see a proposal like this, which is asking for an exemption or a reinterpretation of some rules which are pretty clear about what kinds of uses are and are not permitted, and that the use that is being proposed is very much in the vein of an amusement ride in the form of a room, I would hope that the BZA would err on the side of protecting the integrity of the quarter, the integrity of the zoning, the integrity of the ruling of the Director of Safety and Permits, to err on the side of caution and on the side of the long-term preservation of what makes the quarter so special. And there are probably lots of other places where this kind of use could be located with absolutely no problem, and I would encourage the applicant to look at those. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in opposition? The applicant has an opportunity to rebut.
Thank you. Right next door to us, our proposed location would be a place called Pepper Palace that sells spices. 2 doors down is a place called Politico that sells t-shirts. Relaxed Spot Massage is 3 doors down. I really think that we would benefit the community and benefit that block and not in any way harm the character or nature of the area. I think that we would do something that would be a positive impact. We would bring students from the schools to do internships there under my direction. And I think that it would benefit not only the community but New Orleans as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? I have one quick question to staff, Dr. Munster. One of the things that the applicant brought up was a list of things that stand out as being different from this facility as opposed to other escape room themed facilities. They suggested the size of the venue, that it wasn't open to the public. Their rooms would be corporate themed, trained facilitator being present, post-activity assessments, and then that there would also include a meeting space. In looking at the definition of what's called an indoor amusement facility, do any of these things change that interpretation? In my looking at it, I don't see where that would necessarily change the interpretation, but just wanted wanted to ask you specifically if that affects your interpretation at all.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, no, you're absolutely correct. The theme of the rooms has no differentiation from the perspective of safety and permits. We regulate the use of the space, and the use of the space is the escape room. We don't look at the outcome, we don't look at the population to be served. Those things are things that are outside of the zoning ordinance. So, because this particular escape room seeks to have a corporate team building outcome, it's no different than somebody going to an escape room for pure amusement. We can't differentiate in that. I would also add that the notation that somehow having a larger group in the room somehow makes it less intense of a use than an indoor amusement facility with smaller groups, I would say that that actually works in opposition of that determination.
I was going to ask about that too, but thank you.
I have a question for Dr. Mostert. You gave us examples of what constitute an indoor amusement facility. Can we also get examples of what an office building definition, what would define an office use?
I do not have that right in front of me, so I don't know how the zoning ordinance would speak to it. However, what we would consider an office use would be essentially this building. That there are offices where people go to work. They are generally going to be open to the public during regular office hours, where somebody can walk in and conduct business.
I guess some clarity I'm seeking is like, is there a certain number of offices that are needed? Is there a certain number of permanent employees that are needed for a building to be considered an office space, or is it a little bit more open than that?
It's more open than that, because again, this building would be an office building, but you also have a renovated Shotgun on Canal Street that has one room in it, and that's also an office.
Okay.
I have a question. Are there any, are there any other escape rooms in the French Quarter other than yours?
No, not to my knowledge. And Jared, we have a copy of the definition of an office space that came off the city website, which we clearly would fit into.
Is there a way that we can get that on the record?
It's in our packet actually.
And I have one more question. Do you advertise to the general public?
Right now, we have no website, we have no advertising, we have nothing prepared to do that until we get the approval to go forward. How we would market this would be to corporations specifically directly and not to the general public.
Could someone from the general public book with you?
If they have a large group and they want, general public, would that be like a group from a hospital? Would that be, I don't know who that would be.
A group of 10 people who wanted to experience what you have to offer.
Well, we would make clear to them that what we would offer would be group dynamic training. If that's what they're interested in, we would accept them, and there would be a pre-activity meeting to make sure that they understand that it's not purely amusement that they're coming for. The other part that I think is important to recognize is that, for example, in a psychologist's office, which would clearly be office use, a psychologist could use art therapy as one of their modalities to do their treatment. That would not then be classified as an art gallery or something that has as an amusement because of the activity. That's the differentiation we're trying to make, that the activity is not what's important, it's what the purpose of the activity is. And our purpose is that we're going to be doing something that's permitted under office definition because it's professional regulation, it's professional use. And that's no different to me than a legal office where people make an appointment, they come in, they get professional services, and that's what we're providing, professional services, not amusement. That's how we differ from the other. We're using the escape room as one of the tools that we use to do this group dynamic training, not the only tool. We do other things. We do what's called on-the-run events, which is where we would go to the organization and for any number of people, provide an activity that would train them in how to be a group and improve their group dynamics.
Thank you. I do have heard of a facility in the French Quarter who does offer office training. I've also read in the Times-Picayune about an escape room that is there for entertainment purposes, for a party. If someone wanted to book this for a party of 10 or 15 people, that they would also be able to use it for entertainment purposes. And since there seemed to be only one of these facilities in the French Quarter, I can't help but think that that's you.
No, it's not us. We have no advertising or offering to the public of anything.
Someone was, it may not have been your paid advertising, but it was advertised in the Times-Picayune as an entertainment.
I don't believe it's us.
Oh, I read it in the Times-Picayune sometimes after.
Just a follow-up question to the advertising, because I guess what I'm hung up on is I completely understand the concept of doing certain exercises in an office type environment, but there is an advertisement that's in here that specifically references an escape room. I don't know if that's an advertisement that you were submitting as an example, and it lists several different companies on it, and it has a photo of a group that completed an escape. And so my question is, are you promoting this as team building exercises, or is this promoted as corporate escape room? I mean, how will you market this site?
We will market this as team building and group dynamic training. For groups that have, we have done this before, where groups from all over the world have come to us and had, as I said, pre-activity discussions about what it is they want to accomplish. For example, one of the big 8 accounting firms brought all their accounting interns to our escape room in Miami.
So is the escape room are there other activities that you're doing other than the escape room?
Yes.
So the escape room is not the only thing that you offer as a team building
That's
exercise?
correct. That's absolutely correct.
And what's as an estimate, what is the percentage of use for your other activities versus the escape room?
Probably 30%, 1/3, I would say.
Other activities? So
Yeah.
2/3 of it is using it as an escape room?
2/3 is using the escape room as the training vehicle.
So maybe the bigger part of the problem is that it's identified as the escape room.
Yes, I do understand.
So maybe some strong consideration around how this is being.
But we have a different name for this, which is called Team Building Advisors. It's not.
That's the operator or the actual?
That's the corporation that will operate this facility.
Okay, so I guess I think much to what Commissioner Malone's question was earlier. What precludes you from, if Ty James calls you and asks to book the venue for his 6 buddies? Not trying to say the ones next to me, because that would indicate a quorum.
If this group would like to come to the facility and do a team building activity, first we would discuss with you, Mr. James, what your goal would be in doing that. Do you want to facilitate communication among the different members of the zoning board? That would be terrific. And we would take you in, and we would then do the activity. I would be in the room with you guys observing how you do this, how you, in a time-limited way, solve the problems that are presented. And then afterwards, we would meet in our meeting space there, and I would go over, gee, Mr. James, you did a great job on this area, but you weren't listening when Mr. Richard was having a great idea as to how to solve this. You didn't listen to him. Henry, that could improve.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, what if all of us, not indicating a quorum, just wanted to do it for fun?
So I meet with you and you say, we just want to do this for fun. And I would say that there are other escape rooms that you could do that would be more fun than what we're going to do in our escape room. Because what we're going to do in our escape room is put you under some time constraints and pressure to solve a group of situations that would require you to all work together and do this.
So to get to a shorter answer, would you refuse service?
If you say we're only doing this for fun, we're not interested in any of this other stuff that you're doing, yes, I would refuse your service because it's not what we do in this venue. This venue is going to be very particular.
Trying to keep it short, thank you.
Sorry.
So in terms of trying to get I'm trying to see if there's another avenue to really understand this, because I know that a lot of this is being driven, one, by how it's identified. The name of the entity is probably what's pushing this one certain way. Understanding limits of operation. So is this a space where it would be identified where, let's say if I walked up to the door, I have to come in by appointment. I have to come in, well, strictly by appointment. Is that the lines that you're going along?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. And I guess this is for Dr. Munster. If this were to be designated an office building, office use, does that restrict their operating hours?
It does not.
Does not, okay.
And I guess the only thing that I keep getting concerned about, I guess kind of touching on what Ms. Lustow had mentioned, is just the idea, and maybe it's not necessarily what she mentioned, but more what I'm envisioning is the worry that this is starting off as a corporate themed activity or event space. But should it not turn into generating enough business, can it ultimately turn into, I mean, what's going to be Safety and Permit's ability to monitor this site to say that 6 months from now, if they're not getting business as a corporate themed event facility, what's to say that they don't turn into a traditional modeled escape room 6 months from now? And how do we ensure that that wouldn't happen?
And I think you have centered in on the exact issue of this. The zoning ordinance is a set of land use regulations, not land outcome regulations. We have no ability to look at this facility today and say, even though you're doing the same thing today as you are 6 months from now, because your outcomes have differed, it's a different use. That's just simply not the way the zoning ordinance works. That's not the way it can be enforced. And just to add that if you are trying to make the argument that the only thing we should look at is the outcome, if this were a team building exercise that involves skeet shooting, would anybody make the argument that skeet shooting should be permitted in the French Quarter? It's a completely out of the box thing. And as far as being by appointment only, my understanding is that all of the escape rooms are by appointment only. You have to book them in advance.
Yeah.
You can't just walk in off the street.
Can I ask a question? Indoor amusement is allowed in CBD?
Yep.
I believe so, most districts.
Because that's where the other escape rooms are. They're like 2 blocks away. So, you know, is there anything particular about this location that makes this better than, say, I don't know, Barone Street, 2 blocks away, 3 blocks away?
Well, I certainly couldn't address
right.
that.
So, I mean, that's for them. But to your point about, you know, I think the skeet shooting analogy would work for me pretty well. You know, the BCC does not allow this use.
Correct.
And CBD does.
Correct.
Are there any other questions?
Just one last point. I mean, I guess it comes down to one question that the chairwoman asked earlier. That percentage of use format, I mean, you even in your own admission stated that this would be the majority of the time of usage would be driven around this type of usage or usage outcome. So my question, Mr. Munster, is there any other uses, or what they're inherently proposing, is it allowed as an accessory use in any capacity to some other form of use?
We've never made a determination that a use such as this would be allowable as an accessory use. My inclination would be that unless it is a specifically indicated accessory use within the zoning ordinance, it is not. And we would evaluate any use within a space as an allowable or not allowable primary use.
So if it's secondary, you would still look at it if it's allowed or not?
Correct.
Any other questions? From the board? Sorry. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, in reference to this, is there a number?
It's docket number 32-18.
32-18, I move that we uphold the city's decision.
Second.
With regard to decision appeal docket number 32-18, it's been moved by Commissioner Malone, second by Commissioner Diaz, I think came in first, that to uphold the decision of the Director of the Department of Safety and Permits, finding that there was no error in his decision. All in favor, raise your hand. All 6, no opposition, motion carries. Next item.
Our next item is Item number 13, BZA docket 03318 for a property located at 7107.
Before we begin the next one, we're having some technical issues. Can we just pause for about 5 minutes? Just make sure we get that resolved.
Thank you.
No, it's not working on mine.
It's not working on yours. All right, let me get Mr. Technical to come out of
I
that.
can show him this. I don't know if it's because maybe he's in the system.
Yeah, he's watching some sort of monitoring.
Yeah, and then my coworker just said it's still not working good. So yeah, so I'm telling them to go to the YouTube. I'll look at that. All this purple. That's all my fault.
I like this one. Yeah, well, all the OPSB is.
It should, if you click on it, because all it does is. Yeah, it's all fixed.
Our next item is item number 13, BZA docket 03318, for property located at 7107 St. Charles Avenue. This is an appeal of a decision of the Director of Safety and Permits as per Article 4, Section 4.8 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance regarding the determination that a ligustrum is a shrub rather than a tree, and as a result, the provisions of Article 22, Section 2211B3 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance do not apply.
Thank you. Good morning. Jared Munster, Director of Safety and Permits. The case before you today regarding property at 7107 St. Charles Avenue has to do with a curb cut that was approved by the Departments of Public Works and Safety and Permits to install a driveway to the side street. The provision in question states that curb cuts are prohibited over the critical root zone of a tree. And the critical root zone is a circular area which has a radius of 12 inches to every 1 inch of diameter of trunk, etc. So what is at question before you all today is whether or not this section of code should apply to a shrub, or is that shrub to be considered tree? So the way the department went about addressing this concern was by alerting the Department of Parks and Parkways, who sent their arborist out to the site. Their arborist determined that the plant in question is a ligustrum, which they define as a shrub, not as a tree. And therefore, the department determined that these provisions do not apply because, as Parks and Parkways in their professional opinion stated, the plant is a shrub, not a tree. The plain reading of the zoning ordinance says that the critical root zone of any tree may not be obstructed.
Is the applicant present for docket 33-18?
Good morning, Keith Hardy. I reside at 618 Ottoman Street, right next door to the subject project. This arises out of a curb cut permit that was originally issued in 2013 for a carport and a parking pad. This board denied a variance for that project, and then this particular curb cut permit was resurrected again for another project which involves parking. As far as I can tell, there's parking in the side yard, but I'm not sure that that's what is intended by the approval. On the question of whether this is a tree or a shrub, could I get the staff to put up Exhibit 2 to my letter so that they can see the picture of the tree that's involved?
Ladies, because they're usually not here to do your presentation, can you try to find exhibit number 2 in the submittals for this? Do we have a presentation? Did you guys submit any?
It's part of my package. It's Exhibit 2 to my...
Right, so it's in the public record, but we don't run a presentation during this time.
Does the staff have copies of my exhibits?
Everyone up here has copies of everything, and it's available online on our site.
Then they can see that. This is an 18-foot tree. It's traditionally styled as a bonsai. I've submitted 8 authorities, botanical authorities, that all agree that a ligustrum can be either a tree or a shrub, depending on how it's groomed. This one is groomed 18 feet high. My authorities include the LSU School of Renewable Resources, a book called Selection and Use of Southern Plants for Landscape Design, Clemson University, Arizona State University. The only other botanical source that I've seen that's been provided was by the city, which was attached. Well, it wasn't attached, they referenced it. I looked up the URL that they did, and it's from North Cascades National Park, way out on the West Coast. And it has a definition which is not like my definitions in the context of a landscape environment, but in a wild environment. And it says, woody shrubs grow in the understory of these forests, providing shelter and food for wildlife. Shrubs are also important along stream corridors where their shade helps keep water temperatures from getting too hot. Obviously, that's for a wild habitat, not a planned environment like we have here. The CZO is the applicable law here. The CZO is very clear that and this is all in my letter, a shrub is 2 to 4 feet in high. Again, we have an 18-foot plant here if it's a tree. Small shade trees under the CZO are up to 25 feet. The owner's own architect in Exhibit 7, in the drawing for the curb cut, listed this as, quote, existing tree. And then somebody, I believe, the planner, put an arrow pointing to that tree and wrote in hand, all zoning requirements must be met. Unfortunately, the zoning requirement that you not put a driveway within this prescribed distance of a tree was not followed, so the CZO was not followed here. Parks and Parkways also has a safety rule about trees. They say you should plant a tree, you should put a driveway no closer than 5 feet from a tree. So the law in question says curb cuts are prohibited over the critical root zone of any tree. It doesn't say some trees, good trees, perfectly healthy trees, trees we approve of, any tree. And this, as their own architect indicated, as the CZO indicates, is clearly a tree. And I think if you look at that picture there, you'll see how high this plant is over the car in the picture, and it's clearly a tree. So I believe the decision of the director, with all due deference, was clearly wrong. The CZO botanical sources, the plans of the architect themselves, all say that ligustrum can be trees, and this 18-foot ligustrum is clearly a tree. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in support of docket 33-18?
Good morning. My name is David Kiefer. I live at 7718 Ferret Street, which is in the neighborhood of this property. I'm an architect. I wrote a letter in support of Mr. Hardy's appeal. I'll just say that if you look at the photograph, it's clearly a tree. It adds to the streetscape. It adds to the important pedestrian character of the neighborhood. That is something that the city promotes, and it should be. It should not be destroyed or taken out for the convenience of the property owner. My letter was really about the dimensional requirements of the parking. I'll note that there's no parking on the opposite side of Audubon Street, so if you were turning in or backing out of this driveway, you don't have to contend with cars parking on the opposite side of the street. They're asking for a 20-foot wide parking driveway, which is typical of a two-car. So 2 cars can pass simultaneously, more of a suburban type driveway. There's no need for that unless both cars will be pulling in and pulling out at the same time. 9 feet is a minimum driveway width, 10 feet is okay, 12 feet is sufficient, 14 feet is gracious in terms of parking. I believe that the owner could easily reduce the width of the driveway and also access their parking with no problem, unless they decided to park their car in the side yard setback area, which, assuming they don't do that, a narrower driveway would be sufficient. You could preserve this tree. You could also preserve more on-curb parking for the area, which is really needed. So I would suggest that the maybe Safety and Permits did not consider those issues when they made their decision. I believe it's more of a convenience item and it's not necessary. Thank you.
Anyone else here in support of docket 33-18?
I'm Dana Ennis, Executive Director of the Urban Conservancy. Office is at 1307 Aretha Castle Haley Boulevard. As some of you know, we have a program called the Front Yard Initiative, which in fact is not just about front yards and incentivizing homeowners to reduce their excessive paving in that space, but on their entire lots. a lot of paving is happening behind walls and in backyards. Our clients are the people who will probably, very possibly buy this house from the current owner and who will recognize the excessive paving that this curb cut opens up into as a liability rather than an amenity and will want it removed. That's who a lot of the folks are that we see. The excessive curb cut permits and our efforts to curb excessive paving are inextricably linked, and until those connections are made through for the homeowners and the property owners through code enforcement and education, a combination, this will continue to occur. So I don't, you know, we can't silo these issues. There's the tree, there's the excessive paving that creates access, unnecessarily excessive access into the yard. Just as a quick back of an envelope calculation using the rational method, a 2-inch rain event on this addition of 700 square feet of paving will result in an additional 621 gallons of water discharge per rain event. And that water that previously had someplace to go will result in ponding and pooling on the property, leading to subsidence, or will become a neighbor's problem, or will run directly into the catch basin in the street during that critical first hour of rainfall, and will most likely become somebody else's problem, probably somebody downstream. And so I think it's really, really important that we understand that the onus of water management, beginning with our permitting of the curb cuts and then onto the lots, falls on the property owners who are high and dry. But the onus is on us to convince those homeowners that it's their responsibility and that this is not normal behavior. We can't normalize this sort of behavior. So I hope we can all work together to help drive that point home. Thank you. And I really appreciate folks like Keith and David, who are very, very vigilant and up in the on high ground and really being great partners to the city to let folks know about these things as they come online, because otherwise we're all working at cross purposes as we try to solve this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in support of docket 33-18? Anyone here in opposition? Any questions from the board?
Yes.
Hopefully you have more of a botany or plant background than some of us up here.
We do have 3 cards in opposition.
Okay, I just asked for opposition.
Okay, yeah.
Come up.
Nicole Weber, 2131 Bienville and 2348 St. Thomas Street. I represent the homeowners, the Maristanis, Christine and Michael, who are here. They own the property at 7107 St. Charles. Their home is on the corner of St. Charles and Audubon Street, and the rear of their yard is on the side of Mr. Hardy's home at 618 Audubon. This shrub is actually located in front of Mr. Hardy's home. And in the packet that I provided are close-ups of the shrub and the cavities, the open cavities and the extensive termite damage that has happened over many years to this shrub. We have Parks and Parkways Forester in their statement that was in the packet that Mr. Munster provided the board, stating our urban forester has met with both property owners, explained the situation, and has done some minor root pruning. And they go on to say that the current work did not do any damage to the root system or ligustrum itself that will affect the long-term health of the tree/shrub, referring to it in quotations as a tree and stating that the tree is an elderly ligustrum shrub with numerous issues, including multiple cavities and active termite damage. We had a second forester, Mr. Culpepper, who also backed up Parks and Parkways Forester's decision that the ligustrum is a shrub. We had an arborist, Daniel Benoit, who's going to come here and talk. This meeting's been extremely fast, which I know y'all are excited about, who is going to state the condition of the tree, shrub, And his letter states, I'm a licensed arborist with 17 years of experience and my own tree service company. I assessed the ligustrum shrub located in front of 618 Audubon Street. After observing the state of the shrub due to the termite damage, excessive cavities, decaying root system, and a lack of compartmentalization due to the health of the shrub, I concluded that it is a liability to pedestrians and a safety hazard, therefore should be removed. It is apparent that the shrub has not been cared for and properly maintained for years. The Maristanis, since they have gone through this process, they did come before the BZA board in 2013, as Mr. Hardy stated. That was for a carport, and it was for a variance on a carport, which Mr. Hardy and his brother-in-law, David, who spoke as well, who lives on Ferret, not in the neighborhood, they fought the carport. This permitted carport that is installed was never a point of contention. It has been in the plans. The location of the plant has been shown on the plans in comparison to the curb cut. It has been this driveway that is installed has been on plans and active permits and has been permitted for 5 years since 2013. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in opposition? Come up, please.
Hello. My name is Michael Maristani, 7107 St. Charles Avenue. We live on the property that is adjacent to this ligustrum in question. And I have to say that all of the neighbors that are real neighbors are completely appalled that Keith is doing this ploy to make us pull up a carport and brick wall, CMU block wall that's already installed. All the concrete has been placed, and it'd be a great expense to take it out. So they were appalled, and many of them asked to write letters, and we told some of them go ahead. Other ones we said not necessary. And but I have to tell you, one admitted that she found it very humorous. I was at a party this weekend, and it was my friend's birthday party, and his sister came up to me and said, "Oh my God, I was at my boyfriend's house that's in the neighborhood, and we saw this flyer about a ligustrum being a shrub or a tree, and we had to see what this was all about." And I didn't know, but we went and to look at it, and like she said, "Oh my God, that's my brother's friend that's in this." I mean, they are laughing that we, a bunch of adults here, are trying to determine if something is a tree or a shrub. I mean, my goodness, it's absolutely ridiculous. But other neighbors are just upset with Keith for doing this to us. Since 2013, we've been trying to get some kind of parking. And Keith has, one way or another, prevented us from doing so. And he tries different methods, different times. So first time we did want covered parking, which would require a variance, and he successfully blocked it. At that time, we had the curb cut, and we got a permit for it at that time. He had no objection to the curb cut at that point because he didn't feel like it was material to his case to block us from getting covered parking. So he complained that it obscured his view if we had covered parking and different views, but never protested anything about the curb cut, because this is about a curb cut, not a tree, which he's told me on multiple occasions. And even furthermore, he never ever mentioned the ligustrum during these times. He never cared about the ligustrum. He never treated it for the termites that it had, let it rot, and it's at the end of life and it's going to come down. And so at great expense of pulling up a curb cut and a concrete pad. Does that mean I don't have no time? I have a few other things to say.
That was the end of your time.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christine Maristani, and I live at the property at 7107 St. Charles Avenue. First of all, I'd like to apologize for wasting your time today, as I don't understand why I'm even having to be here. The shrub in question is not on my property. It is on Mr. Keith's property. And also, let it be known that it's on the city side of the property, between the sidewalk and the curb cut. And to let you know, this is how I found out about it. I was told by a neighbor walking her dog that my address was printed on these enlarged flyers in my neighborhood. Mr. Keith Hardy didn't have the dignity to tell me that he was going to be fighting us again on a driveway that we've been trying to get installed since 2013. So this is how I found out about it. I want you to know that. And later on is when I got the information from the city. So it's very upsetting to know that we are constantly being treated this way by Mr. Hardy. The threats, the taunting, it is unreal, and I just cannot take any more of this. Just to note that we have been working on we bought this house, it's over 100 years old. It needed lots of work. My husband and I bought this house to raise our family and to be there and to live there till we die. So I don't know where the other lady in question spoke that we're going to be selling this house, because I've never heard such a thing and she's never talked to us about it. But we have met with Mr. Hardy as good neighbors since the beginning of working on the exterior of our project, of our home. And we've invited him into our home to show him our plans and what we want to do to improve the property and to improve the properties around us. And Mr. Hardy had no intent to work with us at all. He has not been a good neighbor to us on multiple occasions. Like I said earlier, we've been having this permit since 2013. It's been renewed multiple times. It's never come up to our knowledge. We never knew that he had a problem with it until now that this shrub, that he's using this last-ditch effort to prevent us from parking. And also let it note that Mr. Hardy is the only neighbor on the block that does not have off-street parking. Every neighbor on that block has a driveway, and he cannot stand it. So he shouldn't have moved there. He has 50 feet of public parking in front of his home for his car and his wife's car. But he still will leave notes of students parking in front of his property, telling them, hey, go park somewhere else. This is my area right here. And he's also been caught using cones blocking his parking, and the city has called him on that and told him to remove it. So I want to make note that I can't live normal. I can't go outside. My children are afraid to go outside because he constantly stares them down. We're constantly getting threats that we're going to get sued. Our workers are getting notices that they're going to get sued. And this is the first time I've ever seen Mr. Hardy treat the shrub for termites. We've been there since 2009. He's never cared about the the shrub. And there's very little root growth for that shrub to even exist. In the pictures on our presentation showed 5 inches or so on one side.
Okay, that's the end of your time.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else here in opposition to docket 033-18?
Hi, my name is Ashley Davis. I'm at 4311 Toulouse Street, and I would like to cede my time to Nicole Weber.
To speak to the Mayor Standy's efforts, again, this driveway and what they have built and what is existing is legal. It is permitted, and they have had the permits renewed while they went through this process. And it wasn't until the driveway and the sidewalk were formed up and had the rebar in that Mr. Hardy filed this appeal. And again, the plans have been available. He's been aware of the location of the curb cut for at least 5 years. Again, to speak to what the Mayor Standys have done, they don't want to concrete their entire yard. That's not the purpose of this at all. They have done this legally. In fact, they reduced the amount of their originally proposed carport area or driveway area, and it's an existing driveway. It is one that has already been there. They're a corner property. They have parking in the rear, and it is existing. And they've reduced it from what was originally proposed down by 40%. What was originally there, excuse me. What was originally there, they have to reduce the amount of concrete, non-permeable space by 40%. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in opposition to docket 33-18? The applicant has an opportunity to rebut.
I really don't like replying to personal attacks, but I can tell you I am not a person that stares my neighbor's children down in their yards. I did notify Mr. Maristani that I intended to appeal this. I sent it to him in an email, and so I don't know what I was required to do beyond that. I have opposed front and side yard parking all over town for years. I've worked with various organizations, the Louisiana Landmark Society, with the Urban Conservancy, because we believe that parking in front yards, parking in side yards is not appropriate. And in fact, if you look at the staff report from the last time this was before you, the staff said as follows: the reason the zoning ordinance does not allow parking or carports within the required corner side yard is that the front and corner side yards, being visually prominent, are intended to be open, landscaped areas which function together to beautify the landscape. When they are interrupted by parked cars and accessory structures, the beauty and open character of these yards is diminished. To prevent this from happening, the zoning ordinance requires that parking areas and carports be located in less visually prominent areas. The way this is, you've got this 20-foot curb cut, there's this gate, and the cars are going to be parked right in front of the gate. A lot of that, of what they said, is really irrelevant here. The question that's before you is whether the plant in front of my house is a tree or a shrub. I think the answer to that question is exceedingly clear, and I would ask that you answer that as the evidence suggests, and that whatever else has to be done here can move ahead with that decided. Thank you so much.
Any questions from the board?
I have a quick question to Dr. Munster, because you stated, I believe in your opening remarks, that the city arborist visited the site himself or herself and made a determination that it was indeed a shrub.
That's correct. We referred the issue to Parks and Parkways to make a determination as to what this plant is. And their urban forester replied that this is a shrub, not a tree.
Thank you.
Do you know what species of ligustrum they say?
I do not.
I mean, I was just.
Yeah, I thought it was. It's in the definition, but just pulling up some additional notes because I'm gonna make a comment. I do agree that this is kind of honestly ridiculous that we've been sitting here having this conversation. I could think of much other things in the city that we could be addressing, taking our time to address. Just looking at pure definitions, a shrub can grow up to 20 feet in height, not limited to 4 feet. Not sure where you're getting that from, Mr. Hardy, but this is based off of just my quick research of what's defined as a shrub versus a tree. I guess and just a quick question to the property owners. There's two vehicles that's in the images. There's the Prius and another car. Who owns those vehicles? That's what I thought. All right. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's not really a question. I mean, it's looking at, if it's a tree, it's a tree. If it's a shrub, it's a shrub. I always defer to landscape architects and forestry professionals.
Absolutely.
To come up with that definition. So to think of, unless I'm done.
Are there any other questions?
Very good. I mean, I'm inclined to agree based on the health of the tree. I mean,
that was one question I was going to mention. I didn't know if the health of the tree comes into health of the shrub. I'm sorry, health of the plant. let's just say a plant right now. If the health of it comes into this discussion at all, just given seeing some of these additional pictures and looking at the damage that that it's suffered, if that comes into this discussion at all.
No, pursuant to the zoning ordinance, it's quite simply a tree. We don't care if it's a healthy tree, a dying tree, a newly planted. Well, I'm talking about the reference to the zoning ordinance is a tree. Okay. And just to, as a point of clarification for the board, I find it important to just, because of some of the conversation that's occurred, sort of point out what the issue is. The issue is purely a matter of interpretation of the plain text of the zoning ordinance that states curb cuts are prohibited over the critical root zone of any tree. This is not about the width of the driveway, this is not about the amount of paving in the rear yard.
Yeah, I didn't even go into any of that's why I didn't even ask about any of that, because all we have to discuss is whether or not this is a tree or a shrub. So thank you for that.
Shrub.
Any other questions? I'm sorry, I had interrupted you, Commissioner Diaz, when you were making your statement. My apologies.
Yeah, I mean, I totally disagree with the notion of the fact that this curb cut and all that is affecting. I agree with the notion that the tree is a shrub, whatever it is not healthy and it's old, and I'd rather see a better street tree than that. With that said, in the research I did on this, there is some ambiguity about this particular species. So the question I have for staff is, how does the arborist decide when this particular species can be either, depending on how it is growing? There's enough back and forth, but it's what is in the CZO, right? Defines this particular species as a shrub, or is it the arborist saying that Ligustrum japonica, or whatever this is that?
It is our deferring to the Department of Parks and Parkways as the arborists of the city of New Orleans. Our department does not employ anyone qualified to make that determination.
And technically this, I mean, like stated earlier, this is on the city side of that, it's not on someone's property line, it's actually on the city's right of way. So that at the end of the day, if they're the ones theoretically maintaining it, and if they're gonna derive that as a shrub, then I'm gonna defer to them, because they're the ones who, as a point of maintenance, even though adjoining property owners do maintain
Right,
it.
and I think that's my point, is that because it's a shrub that can get large enough. I mean, it can get big, but it's still a shrub. So
And it's still under 20 feet.
Tree limit. Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Yes, please.
Proceed.
Madam Chair, in regards to docket number 033-18, my motion is to uphold the decision of safety permits.
Second. With regard to docket 033-18, it's been moved by Commissioner James, second by Commissioner Malone, to uphold the decision of the Department of Safety and Permits. All in favor, raise your hand. All six, no opposition, the motion carries. Next item.
Our next item is item number 14, BZA docket 03418, for a property located at 1738 Washington Avenue. This is an appeal of a decision of the Director of Safety and Permits as per Article 4, Section 4.8 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, regarding the determination that an expansion of a non-conforming use did not attain legal non-conforming status.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Jared Munster, Director of Safety and Permits. The question before the board today is relative to 1738 Washington Avenue, which is a non-conforming cocktail lounge. The thing at issue is about the back building that is proposed. The rear building, we have imagery from 2013 that shows the structure was in this location up until that point in time. By the time we have aerial imagery in 2014, the structure had been removed and replaced with some sort of shade structure. So essentially what is being proposed at this point, or the determination that we made, is that there is no legal non-conforming status for use of a proposed outbuilding as part of the cocktail lounge. The CZO is incredibly clear that non-conforming uses, including structures or land containing non-conforming uses, shall be prohibited from expansion or increase in cubicle content. And that's precisely what is intended by the appeal before you.
Thank you. Is the applicant present for docket 34-18?
Good morning. I believe it's still morning. My name is Powell Miller. I purchased this building in 2013. I did not, well, and then as you can see from the aerial footage, there was a building in the back. I believe I provided you with a document as to the size of that building compared to the rear yard. When I went to do some renovation on the building, we discovered termite damage, extensive termite damage. So the question was whether we wanted to renovate that damage or if we wanted to, what we wanted to do with it. Decided that it was cost prohibitive, so I tore it down. I did not realize that I needed a demolition permit. I apologize for my ignorance, but we tore it down. My idea was to replace it with a trellis, an arbor. So you can see with some of the images I provided, it was basically, it's a 4x4 steel post structure that had wood and piping for a wisteria that I planted, thinking that that would provide a shade structure. Again, I did not realize I needed a permit to create a arbor or a trellis for a vine, but again, that's my ignorance. That, I guess my green thumb isn't as green as I thought. The wisteria did not do as well as I thought. So I stretched a canvas tarp over that trellis, more like a awning. That created issues with the rain as far as it didn't drain. It wasn't a good awning. So I put tin on top of that. So this is basically a 3, maybe 4-step process of what is there now, which is a trellis or an arbor with a tin roof on it. Okay. So the building that was there that I did tear down without the permit was connected to the bar via kind of an old style walkie-talkie or not a PA system, but an intercom system. Inside the building was a pool table and some bar space where you could set your drinks as you played pool. People who would play pool in this building would communicate with the bartender and say, you know, I need another beer, I'd like a gin and tonic, and then the bartender would come out and deliver, so you didn't have to go into the bar. They would bring you your drinks there. So I believe I've included affidavits of people who have been going to this bar for years and years and years, saying that that's what happened. That's the way this building was used, as an extension of the bar. Also, if you look at the aerial image when the building was there, there's a space between the building and the bar. If you look closely, you can see what was there when I bought the building, which was basically a lot of used and, well, a lot of crawfish pots. They would have crawfish boils out in the backyard, serve drinks, serve crawfish, everybody would hang out there. And again, use it as part of the bar. It's not attached to the residential part of the building. You can see the camelback, I guess, an apartment. So the whole backyard, including the building, used as an extension of the bar, in my mind, based on what I was told and based on what I saw. And all I can say is I apologize for not getting the permits. I'd be happy to apply for a permit, have them inspect it to make sure it's safe, and do anything I could go that direction, because I should have gotten a permit.
Thank you. Anyone else here in support of docket 34-18? Anyone here in opposition? If you can come up, please.
Hi, my name is Stacy Peckham, and I'm at 2832 Barone Street, down the street from the location of the patio. And I'm not sure, I was, because it's worded, and this is the first postcard I've gotten about anything going on over there. I am not in favor of not making that patio conform, or I don't know, I can't say how the building was used before, or not to verify, what it was used for, but if I understand that the patio wasn't permitted, and that, kind of makes sense for, not the, the noise that was created with the new patio, with the open air format, and there was, customers always out there. It was like an extension of the bar, but with no staff out there. And the noise and the talking over one another and drinking and with the voices getting louder is what I didn't like about the patio being there. It was all the noise and unattended, and then there would be kind of messes there in the morning, and it was outside. Maybe this other activity went on inside before, but as far as it being outside with the crawfish boils and stuff, I see there's like kind of food equipment kept out there overnight on the patio. I don't know if it's food or if it's just like restaurant kind of equipment, but it has kind of turned into an outside extension of what's inside with the smell. Sometimes they don't really clean up all around very well. They go through phases and stuff, and I just in general, as far as being a good neighbor, I just wanted to have that patio looked at, or whether it gets redeemed. I want them to comply with the city and not get an exception on that room, if that's what's going on here.
Thank you. Anyone else here in opposition? You can come up.
Hi, my name is Renee Hernandez, and I live at 2824 Baron Street, which is 2 doors down from this particular bar. The problem with the patio is that this tin roof has caused people, when they speak and all, to become like echo. And they're screaming and yelling down there, and loud laughter, which occurs when, people are drunk and having a good time, and this stuff goes on until 4 in the morning. Myself and a lot of the neighbors approached managers and called the police and asked for assistance, and even putting up signs and saying, hey, in respect of our neighbors, can no loud, excessive, this and that, or maybe close the back patio down at a certain hour, as to be considerate of the neighbors. And none of this has been done. As far as this bar is concerned, I've lived there before Katrina, and the building they're talking about was basically a shack shed. At one time, Mr. Cooper, the owner, who I'm friends with, he showed me the shed. It hasn't been used since 2002 when I lived there, and it had been quite a time before that it hadn't been used. It wasn't part of the bar. It was just a building they put back there for, card games and things of that sense. There was a FEMA trailer back there for a long, long time after Katrina. At the whole time that we've been going through this with Barrett's, we've all said to them, we're not opposed to a bar being here. What we're opposed to is the noise levels that are coming out of this bar. Through the live music, they don't have any acoustics that support a live music venue. Doesn't matter to them. They keep insisting it's been a live music venue. It has not been a live music venue from the time that I bought the place up until when Mr. Powell Miller bought the place. We weren't opposed to having acoustic bands, jazz music, decent hours. That's not what they want. They want a party bar that goes till 4 in the morning, and now that the music permit has been pulled, I guess temporarily, and what we're concerned about is that if they comes up brings his code up to compliance with the back, he's going to be allowed and permitted to get the live music back in there, which is like at Christmas time. I'm sorry, but 1 o'clock in the morning is not acceptable for a live brass band to be out in the street. There's children, there's families. I work in the day. A lot of the neighbors work in the day. It's all a noise issue. And we'd like to work with Mr. Powell Miller, and we have tried and tried and tried with our councilwoman, by gathering with him, by trying to. They don't want to conform. They don't want to be good neighbors. They just want to have a party bar, and they do not care about the neighbors.
Thank you. Anyone else here in opposition to docket 34-18? The applicant has an opportunity to rebut.
Thank you. Again, Powell Miller. I have here with me today Josh Earl, who's the manager of the bar for at least the last 3 years. We are aware of the noise complaints. We have been working with people to calm that down, including closing the rear bar back, closing the back patio earlier than the regular bar. If you look at one of the photos I submitted of this structure, it has what I would call my attempt at sound batting, because there was complaints that the noise was too loud. So you can see crisscross, and what it is, it's 1x paneling, cypress 1x, that is below the tin itself by about 12 inches.
Mr. Miller, when did you, excuse me, when did you submit these photos? Because we don't have anything in our packets with anything coming from you directly. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you were referring to documents and I don't see them in here. Do you know when you submitted them to staff?
I do not have the date of the email, but I emailed it to Ms. Hernandez.
Okay. Because I'm just concerned that if you submitted it, we don't have the ability to review these things, and we may want to be able to see this rather than discussing it without the ability to look at what you submitted, because we have nothing from you in our packet.
Madam Chair, is it, if you don't mind if I can ask, is it color images or is it black and white images that you have on hand?
On the email, it's color, because it was
I'm asking what's in your hand.
this is a black and white scan of a photograph from my phone that was emailed.
Madam Chair, can we suspend the rules just so we could get a copy of that image so at least it could be shared with us?
Yes, but I mean, isn't there, you said that you submitted a packet, so I'm assuming that it was more than just the photos? And
Yes.
so my concern is we haven't even reviewed anything that he submitted, so I'm just hesitant. I mean, pictures is one thing to look at, but I don't have any. No, we don't, I don't have those.
I have those. That's the ones with the, but that's not, the images that's in the package are just images from the front door. I think it just shows bottles on the, it's like empty beer bottles.
Yeah, I only had
That's
two,
it.
I had 3 color images and that was it. I don't have whatever those
That's
pictures.
the same images. It's just black and white.
Oh, okay. And staff, do you have anything from Mr. Miller in your package? Okay.
The only reason I'm recommending, I mean, I know what I'm looking at when I can see it that far. I mean, because it's just showing I'm trying to avoid getting too far into the commentary, just a little rebut.
I mean, my suggestion was gonna be to allow Mr. Miller to submit this and just to defer the matter until the next meeting, so that I would hate to make decisions without having reviewed your documents, and I don't think it's fair to try to review them right here, right now, and it probably won't be sufficient to look at whatever you submitted.
I am willing, and again, by submitting it, that would be emailing it to Ms. Hernandez?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We can find, I mean, I'm sure staff will go back and make sure that they, locate whatever you had previously submitted. I don't know if it may have been submitted beyond the deadline for us to review it or not, but I'm sure they'll look into it. Okay. Or they'll contact you. You can contact them to resubmit it if you so desire.
I have a question. You transmitted this via email?
Yes.
Did y'all receive it?
Emily.
Did you receive it?
I'll have to check my spam folder, unfortunately.
But you didn't get it regularly?
I don't recall this email, no.
Yeah, and we have been communicating.
Did you have a record of it on your phone?
Yeah. And along these lines...
What was the date of that?
Okay, sorry.
I'm assuming it had attachments.
I see. I am not able to find that right now. I keep finding the one that has this agenda on it. I don't know if it's because of my phone and I sent it from my computer. They usually sync up.
The only one that I can find on my computer is when you sent, was when you sent over the appeal of the decision, the written appeal from the director. I have his determination, but I don't seem to have anything else. Now that I'm trying to check other things too, that doesn't mean that we don't have.
Yeah, it would have been, sorry, to Mr. Hernandez.
So neither party seems to have it.
Yeah, I apologize. But it was done with the time, it was after the filing of the...
We need the proof of that, and we don't seem
Well,
to have
I'm
it.
not as concerned about the proof of it. I mean, I think if he's, he has documentation here today, I'm reasonably willing to consider that. I'm not gonna argue, because, he didn't know that we didn't have it. So, it's not fair to say that he had to provide proof when he doesn't know we never received it. So I'm just more concerned with making sure that we have all the information in front of us. Whether, I'm not saying it's gonna change anybody's opinions, but just in fairness, to say that we have everything in front of us before we make a decision.
I agree. And along those lines, if you have something, I haven't seen a photo, I didn't submit a photo of the front door with empty beer bottles. I don't know if there's information that can come both ways. If you have something.
Well, no, everything that we receive is part of our record. I don't know what all is included when it's posted, when the information is posted on the website, but those are documents that we've received in response to your submission.
And I'll get with Ms. Hernandez. I'm sure she can tell me where to find those.
At this point, my recommendation is, you'd have to make the official request if you wish to defer the matter.
Yes, I would request that we defer the matter.
We still have to make a vote on it. So we have a request from the applicant to defer this matter to allow full submission of his documents. Is there a motion to that request?
Before that motion, just some comments, just kind of from us going through this time and time again. I'm not opposed to deferment, but I think just one point of clarity still needs to be made just based off of some of the testimony that's even been provided to date. And Mr. Musser and I have been through this a couple times, I think even outside of BZA. Traditionally, once a building, the shed building, once it's been demolished in some theory, that basically any footprint of that nonconformity does go away. Would you agree with that?
That's correct. Once the building that previously occupied the site was removed, any nonconformity associated with it
goes away. Right. And any form of a structure that has some form of a permanent roof element to it is theoretically an expansion of the inherent nonconforming use. Would you agree with that as well?
Yes, sir.
So even, I'm not saying that I'm about to present a motion, I'm just at least talking through a lot of the points that's here right now, that, no matter how much information you really put in front of me, just as one commissioner, that precludes me to think one way. Once it's been demolished, it goes away. Once you build back, you've expanded. Especially with the use of a metal roof. That would then, there's no way to stop city permits or anybody else from coming back to verify if that was to be enclosed at some point. Because just like you've even admitted, you basically tried to put some planning on the trellis in order to provide shade. That didn't work. So the next option you tried was to put a canvas. The canvas didn't work. So the natural inclination is to come back and put something non-permeable. You've now created a true structure. So through your own admission of how this has progressed and understanding how we have to interpret how safety and permits operates in terms of issuing of permits or identification of non-expansion of non-conforming uses, we're already in one direction. That's me speaking before at least a deferment is introduced.
And along this lines, I have a question about the structure itself. Was it engineered and designed by somebody? I mean, it looked pretty substantial.
Yes, Boys Ironwork.
So, all right, so Craig Bowes did so you got
Right, but was it designed to be a covered structure, or was it designed to be a pergola?
Initially a pergola.
Okay, so I mean, there's some issues here with life safety that you know, putting a roof on something that wasn't designed to be roofed. So, you know, hurricane uplift, other things. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why the safety and permits wants to have to get drawings and a permit for something like this. Not to mention the use expansion issue.
And is it possible to have it inspected prior?
I think what we're getting, even if you try to inspect it for it to be something else, we're still, like I said a minute ago, we're still talking about an expansion of a non-conforming use. The rules are the rules. It's pretty spelled out, and once you get into how this is functioning, and much to Rami's point, I mean, now theoretically you've exposed Craig Bowes to some level of exposure if something was to happen in a case of an event. By making that well, technically he's okay, but by professional means, because he didn't stamp it with the roof on it, but it's just causing a perpetual cycle of stuff that's just only going to make the situation worse. I'm saying all of this, I mean, I'm going to introduce the deferment because you requested, but I'm telling you all of this to kind of avoid, once again, wasting a lot of time on this item because it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
So Madam Chair, if a motion's in order.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
Madam Chair, regards to docket number 034-18, my motion is for a 30-day deferral in order to allow the applicant time to formally submit his information, but I'm doing this under a strong level advisory based off of the testimony provided today.
I'll second, but can I add just a comment? It better be more than just 2 photographs.
Yeah, I mean, I only made the suggestion based on the fact that he indicated that there was a packet that he submitted, and it was strictly, I made it clear that this has no bearing on what the final decision would be, whether or not it would change it, but out of consideration of fairness, if he indicated that he previously submitted it. So not at all trying to say it would change anyone's decision, just the fact that he said he had submitted these documents in advance and we hadn't seen them. So there's a motion by Commissioner James, second by Commissioner Diaz to defer the matter to allow the applicant to properly submit additional documentation in regards to his application. All in favor, raise your hand. Is that every? Oh, good. That's all 6. Motion carries. Next item.
Our next item is item number 15, BZA docket 03518 for a property located at 700 Magazine Street. This is an appeal of a decision of the Director of Safety and Permits as per Article 4, Section 4.8 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance regarding the interpretation of building height permitted. The property owner has requested a 30-day deferral to which the applicant does not object.
Good afternoon, Jared Munster, Director of Safety and Permits. The Department of Safety and Permits also has no objection to the deferral request.
Let's see if there are any speakers here before we proceed. Is there anyone here to speak in support of this matter? Do you still want to give your presentation, Dr. Munster, before we take speakers, or do you want to?
Sure, I'll give the brief synopsis of the case.
Okay, we'll just let you speak first before we take the speakers. I just wanted to make sure, rather than going through everything, if we didn't have speakers, we could have just deferred, but go ahead.
Absolutely. So the appeal regarding 700 Magazine Street is alleging an error in the determination of safety and permits that the CZO contemplates a maximum building height that includes an elevator machine room, as opposed to measuring it from the sort of absolute roof height. The regulation is in section 21.6.0.2 of the CZO, and the determination of the department is that because you can build a structure to the maximum building height that is permissible under the zoning ordinance, you can then put the elevator machine room sort of above that. as opposed to from the actual rooftop surface, which is about 3 feet below the actual parapet wall that building height is measured to.
Thank you. You can proceed with your comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is James Galata. I reside at 425 Notre Dame, unit number 701, along with my wife, Susan Talley. We're the applicants, and we do have no objection to the request by the building owner at 700 Magazine to a 30-day deferral, with, of course, the understanding that we will be here in 30 days to respond to Dr. Munster's position on this and the department's position.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here in support of docket 35-18? Anyone here in opposition?
Hi, Chip Lyons, 201 St. Charles, New Orleans. I'm here on behalf of the building owner at 700 Magazine. And the reason for the request for the deferral is that we didn't receive notice that the appeal had been filed until the day before the deadline for submitting written comments. So the applicant has graciously agreed to a 30-day deferral, so that's the reason for the request. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in opposition to docket 35-18? It's not really anything, but I think you both are just making your statements regarding the deferral. Any questions from the board? And it's a pleasure of the board.
In regards to docket 3518, make a motion to accept the deferral request by the Director of Safety Departments and the applicant.
Second.
With regard to docket 35-18, it's been moved by Commissioner Diaz, second by Commissioner Gonzalez to defer the matter 30 days at the request of the parties. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. 5 in support and 1 abstention. Motion carries. Next item.
The next item is our reasonable accommodation appeals. Will the chairwoman please read the hearing rules for reasonable accommodation appeals?
Sure, I think seems like I'm finding. Rules and procedures for public hearings for appeals of reasonable accommodation decisions of the Executive Director of City Planning Commission. The following procedures shall be observed during the appeal hearing. Each speaker shall give his or her name and address prior to speaking on the proposal. The applicant or representative will speak first. The presentation shall be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes for each applicant or representative speaker. But in no event shall the cumulative presentation total by applicants or their representatives exceed 10 minutes. Proponents or persons in favor of the proposal will speak next and be allowed 2 minutes per speaker. Opponents or persons in opposition of the proposal will speak next and be allowed 2 minutes per speaker. The applicant or representative will be allowed a rebuttal. The rebuttal shall be limited to a cumulative maximum of 3 minutes. For an exceptional case, the time limitations may be extended by the presiding officer with the approval of the board. As the board deems necessary, the case may be acted upon at this meeting or deferred for additional information or review. If the case is deferred, it will be acted on at a subsequent meeting as provided by law. All proper parliamentary procedures shall be followed, including recognition of speakers, relevance of argument, and absolute prohibition of applause or demonstration. Standard of review. In considering an appeal of a decision of the Executive Director, the Board of Zoning Adjustments shall consider the application requesting a reasonable accommodation, the Executive Director's decision, the applicant's written statement of the grounds for appeal, and the provisions of this article in order to determine whether the Executive Director's decision was consistent with applicable fair housing laws and the required findings established in Article 27, Section 27.5 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance.
Thank you. Our next item is item 16, reasonable accommodation docket 004-17 for a property located at 2225 St. Bernard Avenue. This is an appeal of the decision of the Executive Director of the City Planning Commission for a reasonable accommodation from the provisions of Article 22, Section 22(8)(b)(1) and Article 22, Section 22(11)(d)(1) and Section D2 to permit the construction of a parking pad in the front yard. This is an after-the-fact request.
Is the applicant present? You can come up, please.
Good morning. Ariane Morgan, 2225 St. Bernard Avenue. I wanted to first just thank the board for the granting me the reasonable accommodation with the modifications. However, the modifications, from my experience, will only bring the conditions of that area back to where it was before. That being, and let me go back a little bit. I purchased the property, the home, 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago. And at that time, there are pictures. I'm not sure you guys have the pictures in the packet, but there are photos of that area where the parking pad is now, the current parking pad, and there's excessive water and mud, which created conditions for mosquitoes, and just visibly just didn't make the property look appealing. So my idea of adding a parking pad was to improve that appearance, as well as to eliminate the excessive mud and water from the rain. That area has very poor drainage. I've called since I've purchased the property to have request the city to do something about the drainage on the street. There's one active drain that's working on the street, and anytime there's a downpour of rain, there's at least almost a feet or two of water on the street parking. So the parking pad in the front lot accommodates myself with my disability, as well as not having to walk around extensive water. So that being said, not only does a parking pad accommodate my disability, but it also improves the appearance of the property. I was going through the report, and there are a couple of other properties in the area that would compare to the parking pad that I added, and I'd like the board to consider granting the stay of the parking pad and it not being modified. The modification requested is to remove a portion of the parking pad and only leave tire tracks, I would assume. But if that modification is made, then the conditions will return, if I'm explaining that correctly. The prior conditions of the mud and the rain, the mud and the water will return. So what are my options, even if I do the modifications? I just don't feel like the modification is necessary at this point. Visibly, the way the property looks now, it looks much better than what it looked before. And like I said, also considering the other locations, 2421 St. Bernard, 2410 St. Bernard, and 2412 St. Bernard, there's more than 40% of the front area of those properties that are paved. Also, I'd like to ask, would the change with the modification request, would it be different if the property was residential and commercial or business?
Is that the end of your
I think so. Let me make Yeah, I covered everything.
Okay, thank you. I just want to go back because I think the way that the directions we're reading for this process mentioned the applicant speaking first, and I realized we don't have the actual report. So definitely staff, if we can maybe fix these to look the directions to look similar to the decision appeal, so that we have a report from the department first.
Sure, it's actually on page,
I mean, we have the report. I'm gonna have to go back and let the department speak. I'm just saying for the future, can we just update our directions to mirror what we have for the decision appeals, so that we make sure that we have a spot for the department to give their report first. So, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Sorry, we kind of went backwards.
Not a problem at all. Bob Rivers, Executive Director of the City Planning Commission. This is an application for a reasonable accommodation at 2225 St. Bernard Avenue, specifically requesting after the fact approval for variances of 3 provisions in the zoning ordinance: 22.8.B.1, 22.11.D.1, 2211.D.2, all of which prohibit parking in the front yard setback. In reviewing the application, we recommended granted a modified approval, recognizing that 1, there's a clear disability, 2, that the accommodation is necessary to enable the applicant to access the dwelling, and therefore we recommended the approval of an accommodation permitting parking in the front yard setback. After making that determination, we looked at the actual design that was being proposed and felt that it was not consistent with the provisions of the zoning ordinance, particularly section 22.8.E, as illustrated in figure 22-4, which provides for parking strips to be utilized. And the purpose for this is, the city is in a very dire issue with managing stormwater. I think the application is correct that we have a number of streets in this city where stormwater drainage, stormwater management is less than ideal. Our argument is that adding more pavement only exacerbates that situation, and that there are alternatives to mud in terms of providing a permeable surface, and I don't think there is a choice being forced here. That is, you either do something that is accessible or you do something that is permeable. I think there is a way to address each need, and therefore we did not feel that the issue of permeability was something that sustained the ability, and again, remember that we are talking about a reasonable accommodation. We're talking about a very narrow inquiry about accommodating a disability, and we did not feel that the permeability issue was germane to that analysis. So we recommended modified approval with a permeable alternative to the design.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak in support of reasonable accommodation docket number 4-17? Anyone here in opposition?
Would that be in favor of my daughter?
Yes.
Wait, Dad, hold on a second.
You got to speak at the mic, I'm sorry.
I apologize. Was my time up?
I'm not sure.
I have at least.
We had about 20 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, I just wanna speak really quickly. Oh gosh, let me get my thoughts together. So not only am I okay with the modification, but also I'd like the board to consider the visibility of the the mud and the conditions, and that the parking pad actually improves the property as well as the flooding that was in the front area of the property. The work that was done allows for the water to drain to the street now, but now you have a problem with the street where you know there's 2 or 3 feet of water. So I just want the board to consider that as well.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead, sir.
Yes.
Give your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Andrew Jason Morgan Sr., 1409 Annette Street, New Orleans, Louisiana, 70116. What we're trying to show you all is that the pavement that my daughter had not only helps her with her mobility as moving around her property, but we all failing to realize that the cement that's the city and the commission, and it's well documented that it does have effect on drainage. But let's look at the large oak tree that's in front of our property. I've observed the runoff from the water from the cement that she had there does not affect any water going into the street because the tree sucks up all the water that's cascading down from our property to the street. There's a large area that does not flood in front of our property. So look at it carefully. I'm a cultural anthropologist. I'm a gardener landscaper. And I know that that tree sucks up a tremendous amount of water to live and flourish in front of our house. As a matter of fact, the city had to come and cut some of the limbs from her house. The water does not affect the drainage in the street because the tree sucks up the water.
Thank you. Anyone else here in support of reasonable accommodation docket 4-17? Anyone here in opposition to docket 4-17? Any questions from the board?
Yeah.
I just had one, just because I know you, I know you're gonna probably have a few, but I just had one. I just wanted to understand the when you're talking about making modifications to the paving. What are you talking about? Because I was just trying to visualize, because I know that there was I know that there was some paving that was done along the front portion of the house, as well as the paving along the side where the vehicle is parked. So I was just trying to understand the modification. Will it include removal of some of that front portion, as well as the discussion of the parking
So
pad?
I believe the pavement that is along the side of the house was pre-existing condition.
Right.
And so what we would be suggesting is only applicable to the pad in the front, the additional pavement that was added.
Okay, because I was just trying to understand where because it looks like, and I'm trying to find the picture that showed where the vehicle was parked, and that was what I was trying to, I guess, understand, was where specifically the vehicle is parked versus where the paving is, because there's paving along the side of the house that looks like sufficient to fit a car, but then there's paving along the front part of the house as well. And so I was trying to understand where it looked like the vehicle was parked more along the side of the house, so I was just trying to understand the reason for the paving along the front part of the house.
Sure. My understanding is that there is, this is a double,
Okay.
and that the parking along the side, there's sufficient room for one legal parking pad along the side, and again, that's pre-existing condition. That is utilized by the tenant. So, as currently configured, there is no parking that is available unless they stack up in the.
I understand. Okay, so this is an additional parking space that's
Correct.
sitting along the front part of
If
the
you look
house.
at, I think it's page 2 of the staff report, you'll see the highlighted area shows the added pavement.
I got it.
Yeah, it's
Like a shared driveway?
I'm sorry?
A shared driveway, you access both
It's
parking
a shared
areas?
curb, yes, shared curb cut.
But they park in different spaces. One parks straight and one goes right.
Right, so what was approved then? I'm confused. Did you approve parking in that? It just has to be wheel strips in that purple zone?
Correct.
So you're allowed.
I guess the only thing is trying to get a better sense of clarity, and I think for the property owners clarity, and as well as for the father who's spoken on our behalf, just to try to to kind of maybe help to better explain this situation. What we're looking at is, while I appreciate your comments about the oak tree, when you expand the width of the driveway, as it's shown right now, that is what's actually more attributing to where the runoff is going directly to the street and pooling along St. Bernard in that parking lane. By providing if the driveway was maintained as it originally was in width, you would be able to pull in and then be able to make the right turn into the parking pad as you have it shown right now. So my appreciation of it is about the width of this driveway, as well as if there was an opportunity to maybe even just put a minimum strip that broke where the parking pad is attached to the sidewalk. Not necessarily going, I understand that there's a recommendation of going to parking strips, but I understand that with mobility, trying to get in and out of a vehicle, even with permeable systems directly next to the strips, it can be problematic. I mean, this is something that I've just at least observed in applications around town where permeable systems have been put next to parking areas. That's a problem. But I think there may be a way to still try to hopefully mitigate the situation without necessarily going to that extent.
So if you look at the recommendation or the modified approval, there are two components to the, one was the strips and the second was to have some sort of a delineation between the pad and I think that's what you're alluding to, either a strip, landscape strip, or some sort of a wall.
Right.
But you're also recommending keeping the concrete next to the driver's side door. Is that right? You're okay with that?
We did. I mean, I certainly think that there is
there warrants a need for that.
For accessibility reasons, there needs to be a solid path that the applicant can use from the car to the door.
So if you were to, you basically are calling to cut out the concrete to a certain extent and put back something else in that strip between the sidewalk and the parking space, and then you have either the two drive strips or the fully permeable.
So we recommend the drive strips or fully permeable. I think would certainly.
Right. So like okay, got it.
So I guess just looking at the dimensions that's noted on here, there's a 19.2 wide and a 13.9. I'm assuming that's the depth from the edge of the sidewalk going back towards the house. Is that dimension?
13 feet, I think, is going from the sidewalk to the house, and 19 feet
is across. Right. If you take that into consideration, knowing the standard dimensions of a parking stall, we could easily say that the parking pad itself could easily be 12 feet in width, which would be 9 feet wide of parking, along with a 3-foot area of refuge for someone to get in and out of a vehicle. If you're looking at the size of, let's say if we were looking at it from a handicap parking stall, 9 feet with a 3-foot strip. Yeah. Since it's 13'9", I mean, you could easily probably propose just a 12-inch or 12.5-inch cutaway between the sidewalk and the pad itself. I know we're getting kind of a little bit down into the minutia, but I think this at least helps to provide us a better level of clarity of what the size of the parking pad really should be at that point, which helps to allude to provision number 2 inside the recommendation.
And even those 12 inches you mentioned would make a difference.
It's anything that just to become a catchment from the parking pad for runoff.
Yeah, I think my bigger concern is that catchment than the 2 strips. So again, just catching the runoff. I'm just thinking about the practicality of I'm basically tearing everything out if you're not careful.
If you do it otherwise.
If you do it otherwise, right? So if you cut out just a 3-foot strip or whatever that dimension is, I don't know what it. I don't want to do that math right now.
If it's 12.9, I'm sorry, if it's 13.9 in width, I'm saying to go down to maybe 12 or 12.5, which allows for at least a 12-inch cutaway.
12 to 15 inches, right, cutaway, separating the parking pad from the sidewalk. It'll catch the runoff and, I won't get into the statics, but it solves a myriad of issues in my opinion. I'd like to hear with the applicant. She had a question.
Yeah, I just
just wanna make sure that I have clarification on the second, recommendation. And once you guys finish discussing it, if you can just let me know what the decision is, and I just need some clarity. I emailed Ms. Emily back and forth, and she kinda helped me to understand what the modification request was, but I just I'm not that clear. So whenever you guys get to that point, please let me know exactly, what you propose.
Is it possible I could make
If
another?
you can come up to the
mic,
sir.
If you don't mind. Yeah.
Okay. They're describing like cutting 12 inches from the pad to the sidewalk. The sidewalk is already improved before this situation was applied. The cement was applied to that area and smoothed out and straightened out and figured out in number terms. If we cut a 12-inch strip from the pad to the sidewalk, that is going to create a problem for someone getting out of the car to step into that 112-foot area for the length of the car.
So that's why I made the mention earlier.
I appreciate it.
So to give you a better sense of clarity, the way that a handicap parking stall is usually derived, you would have either 8.5 to 9 feet width of the parking area. What I'm proposing is that it's a 12-foot pad. If you have that, you could then still have a 3-foot section next to the car of where you can step out and not step into the mud. So that's why I'm saying it's 12 feet in depth from the extent of where you have it poured right now. So if you only cut away 12 inches of concrete from the area that you guys poured already, that gives an area for the water to run off from the parking pad and go to return back to earth without it having to run to the sidewalk. What we're trying to prevent is further rainwater runoff across the sidewalk, then which goes to the right of way. We're trying to capture as much of it on site as possible without it creating further issue.
I agree to disagree.
Okay.
The 12-inch gap from the pad to the sidewalk may catch some of the water, but it won't absorb a whole lot of water to make a big difference.
But it's all
and then once it gets washed out of that area, you're going to create a concave dip.
Right.
So inside of that 12-inch area.
So I think this actually comes back to the director's point earlier, but there's other forms of permeable that could happen in that area that won't cause an erosion.
Right, and what I think Todd and I are kind of on the same page about is that one option is to tear everything up and make it all permeable, which would require digging that up, digging out all the soil, putting gravel, putting an underlayer of landscaping and a permeable surface that allows that water to be absorbed. We're trying to find a kind of in-between alternative where you saw cut as much as you can out to make a planting strip, put some, you can make it some sort of French drain, but the idea is to catch the water there and put, some plantings, and you could even have a stepping stone, I would assume, by where the car door is. That's set inside the landscaping. So think of it as a landscaping strip like you have between the sidewalk and the street.
So we're talking about the area, not the area where the existing driveway is. We're talking about the area between the sidewalk and where I park.
Correct.
Okay, so
Correct.
we cut those inches out, and you're saying put something else there to prevent the mud and the rain. How do we know if that's going to really? How do we know whatever we put there is not going to flood? Because it still floods.
So it's all technically how you landscape or mitigate what happens inside that area. I mean, it could just be as simple as putting gravel in that spot, and that's still a permeable system. It could be turf, like much to what they spoke to earlier. That helps to mitigate, and it doesn't become an erosion issue. You could easily put a landscape strip in there and have some form of mulch as long as everything's built up to a certain point. So we're trying to find something that prevents it from coming across. Another big part of the issue is, let's say, not necessarily you're parking in that spot. You don't want to create a condition where while you're parking there, someone else actually comes in and tries to park and squeeze next to you, and they're parking on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
That's another inherent problem that comes with if it just stays contiguous. You're going to do it because you've been through here and been through the process, but that's not going to stop someone else from doing it without you having to constantly go out there to correct it. So it helps to just create a delineation between the public right of way versus where you have to park, and by providing 12 feet in width, that's more than enough substantial parking pad for you to park and be able to get out of a vehicle without any obstruction.
Okay.
Well, I would like to inject one other thing.
You have to talk into the mic, sir.
I would like to inject one other thing between this commission and the board, that we're dealing with behavioral economics here. We talking about she has to put forth all this money. It doesn't make that much difference for 12 inches. You're still going to get the same effect of runoff. You're not going to improve it. We have improved the area. I'm saying we because I love my daughter and I'm in here to support my daughter. I even call up all my ancestors to help me with this matter, to explain to you all that she needs the help. I'm proud of my daughter. I was a single parent. I brought her a long ways, and she's really impressed me. This is throwing everything out of whack for her future and my decision to continuously love her like I have been loving her, and the improvement that she's showed me that she can solve problems and improve her life along with her son. She's a single person too.
And
so we know how to struggle.
And so, what we're trying to do, like we have been going back and forth with your daughter, the proposal was to do much more extensive work to remove much more concrete. What we're trying to do is a situation where we can remove as little concrete as possible, but understand that there's some that has to be removed just to allow for some type of runoff. There may be disagreement on how much runoff you think is going to really happen, but this is a way to, number one, have a situation where some of this water can run off between the right-of-way and the actual sidewalk, and to prevent a future situation where you may have more parking come in that we're not even accounting for right now. So this was a way to have a compromise. We didn't want to make her have to pull up everything, so we're trying to figure out the next best possible solution, and that's what this is.
And it's a big compromise considering it's an after-the-fact matter, and we're trying our best to work with you on that matter, seeing as how it was already done to your expense, but done incorrectly. And Commissioner James and Diaz especially trying to come up with something that could comply and improve the area and satisfy the city's requirements without you having to go through the headaches and hassle and the expense of pulling it all up, which is what the recommendation is.
No, it's enough. That's enough. Thank you.
Can I just make one suggestion before? So she's not
Wait,
here.
can I say something really quick? I'm okay with the provision, with the modification on the second. I'm completely okay with it. I appreciate you guys accommodating me and allowing me to have an alternative to digging the whole thing up. I really want to comply with the zoning board, and I want to do whatever it takes. And like Mr. Gonzalez said, it wasn't after fact. I had no idea that I needed the permit, so had I known that, I definitely wanted to make sure that it was done correctly. So whatever you guys suggest, I'm open to it. I appreciate that.
And thank you. And I was just going to suggest, she's not here. She left, but Dana Ennis from Urban Conservancy and Front Yard Initiative, if you want to reach out to them and talk to them, they may have some clever suggestions on how to do this, and they even have some resources to help with the work. So
that would be great.
I would recommend.
We can certainly put her in.
Give me enough time to get it done. Of course, the money that it's going to take to get it done.
Well, can the city help, or can you send one of the...
You have to talk into the mic.
And that's what I was recommending. That's what I was recommending.
Can the city come out and help her with their equipment just to cut that piece to show her that we are applying, we are going along with your recommendations?
Right, I don't know that we
can. Let them help her.
We're going to do what we can. That's within what we're legally allowed to do, is all I can tell you.
Okay. You take that legality to the full extent of sending one of the crews out to cut that 12 inches.
Whatever is, all I can tell you is what they're legally allowed to do in terms of assisting. That's what they're going to try to do, and that's what they've been doing up to this point. But I can't say that somebody's going to come out there and do the work for you.
Yeah, but it's next to the sidewalk, which is a public road.
Right, but the pavement was not put there by the city,
yeah,
so you can't expect.
My daughter wants me to give up, and I'm not giving up.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. I know you still had a question. Ms. Morgan, I wanted to make sure that you would completely understand. You said you had one thing you still wanted clarified, so I just wanted to make sure that everything was...
you guys have explained it enough for me.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
No, for motions in order, but ma'am, and we appreciate you taking the time to at least come through the process, because more often than not, people do not do it. We understand, even though you did it after the fact, thank you for taking the time and being patient and understanding what it takes to get this done.
Yeah, I second that. We definitely appreciate your time and patience.
And I apologize for my dad. He's very emotional about stuff.
No need to apologize for a parent, nothing at all.
He's being a
He
dad.
wants to win all the time, but sometimes
He's protective of his daughter.
Yeah, and I
completely.
feel like as a person and as a resident, I have to take accountability.
Sure.
Even though I didn't know about the permit,
Mhm.
I have to take accountability for the fact that it was done and it wasn't done correctly. So,
And thank you so much again, like we said, for you coming out and taking care of doing things the proper way.
thank you. Am I gonna receive a report or something?
I think when everything is finalized, you should get something that'll kind of, I think like lay out what we've discussed today. Is that right?
Yes, you'll receive a resolution, which is the written decision by the board within, we'll release it electronically within 10 days, so I'll email it to you within 10 days, and we'll also mail one to you.
And can you be sure to submit those resources that I can use?
Yeah, I was gonna say, we can include
in
that communication,
Okay.
I know you mentioned gravel or
the
something
Urban
like that.
Conservancy.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you guys.
And just to clarify before we go with you, so it says in here that and prior to final approval, that they need to show plans and whatnot. Is that do you know if Urban Conservancy and Front Yard Initiative, do they help with that kind of stuff? I'm curious. I guess I can
First putting plans and all together?
Yeah, those provisos, that first proviso.
Provide the calls for a plan. So what I'm assuming, I'm going to make the motion in a second, but we're keeping, you've got an A and a B, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm reading as the two strips we're saying we're not going to ask for, but we are going to ask for the delineation between the front yard and the street. Is that correct? I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. It's not clear to me what we're voting on.
Well, it's not. So I think even based off of what was written here, we're going to have to make a modified statement under the condition number 1 anyway, and probably what I was going to recommend that we just clearly state a 12-foot wide parking pad, and that would be the modification as opposed to A and B.
Right. Got it.
Yes. Okay.
So you want me to out? All right. I know you said you was about to make the motion, so this is Rami's world. I feel weird stepping in his shoes right now. Madam Chair, we're across the docket number RA 004-17. My motion would be to grant the request with a modification. In this modified solution, that they would be able to provide the parking stall within the front yard, but limit the width of that parking stall to 12 feet in width, which comes in closer into compliance with the standards of an ADA compliant parking stall, and to modify the existing conditions of that parking pad to limit the subsequent runoff by maintaining that footprint as a pad size. I'm not sure if we need to add any other provisions.
Well, I thought the delineation between front yard and parking sidewalk was a good one, the way that was phrased. Yeah.
You know what? I also asked a question about commercial use because I have started my own business. I wasn't sure if there was a difference. I hate to go backwards, but no.
No, it doesn't. I'm gonna tell you that let's just stick to the course of what you have right now.
Thank you.
Trust me.
I'm just trying.
Cool.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. That's all.
Yeah, no, that's
because the other properties have parking in front, so.
And I'm familiar with it, and then I'll be the first one to admit, my family owns a building across the street from you. That's one of those commercial buildings that I normally eventually have to pull up those parking stalls. So
okay,
let's try to avoid it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not gonna come back though.
All right. That is on the record. That Taji all this parking. I already know it's gonna happen.
Any other properties you want to tell us about?
Nope. I got one in New Orleans these next week. You know, sure. So no, I'm joking.
No doubt.
Alright, so back to the
Back to
motion
the motion.
that's still
Thank you.
open.
No more jokes. So, understanding that, as I previously stated, that condition of limiting the parking pad to no more than 12 feet in width to allow for the proper runoff condition between the public right of way and the proposed parking pad.
And the second proviso about the term of the use.
Correct. And maintaining the second, item, the reasonable accommodation granted hearing. I'm gonna just take the language from,
I just wanted to make
I'll
sure.
repeat it and I'll second.
With regards to reasonable accommodation docket 004-17, it's been moved by Commissioner James, second by Commissioner Diaz, to grant a modified approval to the request to allow for a delineation between the sidewalk and the driveway, and with the second noted proviso as stated in the report. That's the delineation one. All in favor, raise your hand. All 6, no opposition, the motion carries. Next item.
Would the board consider a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So
It's been moved by Commissioner Diaz, second by Commissioner James to adjourn. All in favor, raise your hand. Of course, unanimous. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.